Does it seem strange to you? The confetti, the balloons, the mile-wide grins, the victory dance to welcome in the air, to a state of disrepair. This sure seems strange to me. They're acting like they won the lottery.
You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're discussing the state lottery, track 13 on Less Talk, More Rock. And this is our 9th Less Talk, More Rock episode, which feels kind of appropriate considering this is, the 25th anniversary of that album.
Yeah, and we're less than a year on from our national election here in the United States. Since then, we've had a recall election in the state of California. We just had the Canadian national election yesterday. And this 25-year-old song is still pretty much terrifyingly relevant in a way that only propaganda seems to be capable of hitting on their records. So this is one of those tunes that only seems to get a little more relevant, huh?
Like so many songs. And I think especially one that I've overlooked.
Yeah.
Criminally for a very long time. I don't know if it's because it's at the end of the record, if it is stylistically or in terms of even its tone, it's so drastically different from a lot of the rest of the songs on this album. But I think only within the last year or so, probably because of hearing so much from fans, did I go back and think like, what am I missing and what am I overlooking with this track?
Yeah.
And this week has confirmed that I have been, in fact, neglecting this song. But I'm glad to talk about it today, even though it's going to be maybe a heavy conversation in some ways.
Yeah, and I am pretty intrigued that we are recording this the day after the Canadian national election. So Justin Trudeau and the Liberals were just handed another term with a Liberal minority in which they won 158 seats, and a majority in Canada is 170 seats. So the election result basically mirrored the 2019 Canadian election, and the Canadian election yesterday cost around $600 million to get a mirror image result that was achieved only 2 years ago. So there has been a huge amount of articles today in the Canadian press about what was this all for, because we've, spent hundreds of millions of dollars that could have gone to almost anything else, but we're doing this. So there's a lot of really smart people in Canada that are talking about this right now. And so you and I are basically the last people that people should come to for analysis on the Canadian election. So definitely take into consideration that Keith and I do not live in Canada and that there's tons of great stuff. I was on the Toronto Star a lot today. So just kind of perusing it, and I'm still figuring out the Canadian media too. It's been a long time since I've lived there, and the election results yesterday were basically the same as 2 years ago. So there's a lot of people who are saying, "What was this all for?"
Right. Well, Greg, you said that this song is timeless, right? It's so relevant now, but it also feels, of course, borderless, because if they're describing, their own, if the band is describing their own experiences in Canada. Well, even with the pictures that you shared kind of cryptically this week, hinting toward the listeners, the song that we would be recording next, they almost didn't seem real.
Yeah.
In that they fit the lyrics of this song so much. But this isn't a distinctly Canadian or American thing.
No
it
way.
Just seems to be a distinctly electoral politic thing that transcends perhaps, borders and generation or decade now.
Absolutely. And I love that some of our listeners out there pick up on my little cryptic messaging. Sometimes I toss little hints out into the internet land, and I see if anybody is like, "Hey, are you working on that next?" So sometimes that happens and I get a real big kick out of it. But Keith, before we get into the song, we have a little bit of business to discuss here, because I have some things I need to get off my chest.
Right. I know that we had a little bit of a snafu with Super Bowl Patriot 36, and there is somewhat of a complex and involved story on how you were able to salvage that episode.
Yeah, so I have to tell this story, okay? And I know that it has nothing to do with the state lottery, but I just can't even believe what I did last week. So when you and I downloaded the audio last week on Zencaster downloads as two separate audio tracks. Your audio downloaded perfectly, and mine did not download. It was flawed and corrupted, and I spent hours after you and I got off the phone with tech support at Zencaster trying to rescue my half of the audio until I basically just said to the tech support person, the audio is lost, isn't it? Please just be honest with me. I need to know. And they were like, it's lost. I'm so sorry. And then it was like click.
Up and vanished like a fart in the wind.
Yep, exactly. So that audio was lost. So what I essentially was left with, Keith, were two choices. One, I could wait a week and re-record Super Bowl Patriot with you for what we would be doing tonight.
Right.
Or I went on and I was like talking about like how lost audio is like really disappointing on my other podcast Twitter page. And Damian Abraham from Fucked Up commented and said, one time I re-recorded my entire half of a conversation because my audio was lost too. Yeah. And I was like, boom, light bulb. And so
it's like audio green screen.
Yeah. Yeah. So I put your audio into one track of Logic. And essentially, Keith, what I did is I had a conversation with you with your audio for a couple of hours.
That's insane.
So every time I go, on the Super Bowl Patriot episode, it's literally me talking into my microphone to a recording of your voice. Every single thing you hear from me on the Super Bowl Patriot episode was recorded hours after our original conversation. And what I was trying to do was replicate my half of the conversation to the best of my ability and have a conversation with a pre-recorded audio of your voice. And it took me 11 hours to make that 90-minute episode. So I literally spent all of Sunday making that episode. It took me the entire day. And that's what I did to make sure that I didn't have to have you re-record, because our time together is so special and so precious because our schedules are so challenging.
Right.
That the thought of losing an entire week of time with you was just something I had to do everything in my power to not do, because I really wanted to talk about state lottery. I didn't want to talk about Super Bowl Patriot again. We already did that. I
was going to say too, you were pretty clear that you were stressed from that conversation. So the idea of you doing that all over again was probably not the most appealing option.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with a recording of your voice and recorded the whole thing. And I told a few friends who have listened to like every episode. Like I think I told Jamie Fougere, and I think I told John Grubb, and I think I told my friend Josh, who was who did the cover who was on our Resisting Tyrannical Government episode. So I told a few people, I said, this is what I did to make this episode. I need you to tell me if you can hear the difference, because if the episode is completely screwed up, I need to take it down and we need to do it again. Because this is going to be online forever. And all of them were like, couldn't even tell. And I was like, yes. So if anybody out there listens to our Super Bowl Patriot episode, you are listening to me having a conversation with a recording of Keith's voice from hours and hours before. So it took me 11 hours. And it was quite an adventure. It was hands down the hardest podcast episode I've ever made in my entire life, across making hundreds of these at this point.
Right.
So, that's my story on making Super Bowl Patriot 36 last week, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Dedication, Greg.
I know. And so, before we get into state lottery as well, I have another apology that I have to make. I have a shout out to give to a friend of the podcast named Nina Crawford. So I owe Nina a public apology, because Nina, she did a cover of Gamble for the episode that we did with Chris Hanna on episode number 60. And I was so caught up in the complexity of life that week and making that episode and transitioning between all the covers and the originals and the cover versions and Chris's interview and our conversation.
It was a lot of content. Yeah.
It got really complex making that episode. It's like a big puzzle pieces on my screen. So Nina did an awesome job on making a cover, and I 100% forgot to put it in the episode. So I wanted to put Nina's cover of Gamble right here at the beginning of this episode, because Nina did an amazing job covering Gamble. So this is Nina Crawford covering Gamble, which should have gone in episode number 60, but I made a big mistake. So thank you so much, Nina. Here's the cover of Gamble, and we'll be back in just a second.
Hips are swaying and your eyes are saying that you need two gamblers for this game you're playing. And I might want you, yeah, but I don't need you. You won't sleep in my bed, no, you won't sleep in my bed, no, you won't sleep in my bed anymore. It's like a dead end. Yeah, even when I was 7, this English country, with my hands up to heaven. God's dead then, and he's never been back again. And I don't think about it, no, I don't think about it, no, I don't think about it anymore. Yeah, it's a gamble, your fingers burn from the last time that you flew and fled, and the shadows as you walk around will still be there till the sun goes down. Venus flights out 20 years now. Check the track sheet when you're all alone. Sunday morning, pistol by the phone. It's a gamble when your fingers burn from the last night that you flew and fled, and the shadows that you walk around will still be there when the sun goes down. Venus flights out 20 years now. Chances falling flat like a union recruitment draft. That the life you want to live ain't the one you're looking at. No more risk in a brain cell than any Vegas hotel. When you can't find the pit boss, no, you can't find the pit boss, and you can't find the pit boss anywhere. Anywhere, anywhere. Anywhere, anywhere. Anywhere, anywhere.
Okay, thank you so much, Nina. That was fantastic. And everybody, that should have been in episode 60. My mistake. And I openly apologize. Sometimes these projects for this podcast get a little nuts. And that's just kind of how we roll here at Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. So thanks again, Nina. And we're going to go on with the episode now.
All right, Greg. Well, I know that you have amassed quite a collection of guests, an overwhelming amount of guests, perhaps, for this episode. Tell us a little bit about who is featured for the state lottery.
Yes. So I have 3 guests on this episode, and everybody who has seen the show cover that we put on social media knows who the guests are already. But we have 3 guests on this episode because that's just kind of how it shook out. And I follow every story that I can find with regards to these songs. So there is a bunch of covers in this episode as well that we're going to include throughout the episode. So this is kind of like a deluxe episode, if you will, going all out on this one. And our first guest is the magnificent Damian Abraham. Damian is the vocalist for the Canadian punk band Fucked Up. He is the host of Turned Out a Punk, which is probably my favorite music podcast ever. And actually, well, Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality, probably, but that's a special one. But so So Damian's here, and he's an all-around music fan extraordinaire. And I've been biding my time to get Damian on the podcast at the perfect time, and our stars aligned. I'm a huge fan of Damian's podcast. I'm a huge fan of Fucked Up, and this is a real thrill to have Damian on the show. So we're going to hear a cover by a band called Sorrower, who I hit up on YouTube, and they told me I could totally put the cover in the episode. So I'm excited about this. So we're going to have a cover from Sorrower, and then we're going to hear my conversation with Damian Abraham from Fucked Up. So here's Sorrower, and then enjoy my chat with Damian Abraham. Damian Abraham, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thank you for having me.
It is a delight, Damian, to have you on the show. I'm a huge fan of your podcast and Turned Out a Punk. And, I'm just so delighted that, we can do this and hang out, because I know that if your life is anything like mine, you kind of like live and breathe podcast appointments and scheduling and interviewing and editing and booking. So, I'm glad that you were willing to take a little bit of time to, put your own podcast machine on hold to talk to me on a different podcast. It's kind of overwhelming, isn't it?
I look at Turn It a Punk as just being this like thing that's on fire, and I'm constantly just trying to put out enough of the fire to keep it going. And
yeah.
And it's also like sort of this, it's probably the same way with you, right? Where it's an addiction because you love doing it. You know, like it's really, yeah. So like I find it's this sort of self-imposed stress. Like
right.
There's no reason I have to do 2 episodes a week, but other than because I like doing it.
Yeah, and Shane Told was recently on the show too for a different Less Talk More Rock track, and he had similar thoughts about his show. And so I'm glad to hear other people doing their show and just describing it as an obsession. This show is a compulsion for me entirely. Like I'm a compulsively reactive person when it comes to making this podcast. Like earlier, like 30 minutes ago, you're like, hey, can we record like in like 15 or 20 minutes? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And like, I just like turn my life upside down in any given moment to make sure that I can compulsively do this show. And I'm glad to hear that you're kind of the same way, because it's just a lot of, it's hilarious. And I don't think a lot of people outside of this really understand what you have to do to make something like this in independent media. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like, I think it's a lot like making a zine,
Yeah.
or like, where you really have to be self-motivated to do it. And I look at it because the one thing that I find motivates me the most is knowing how easy it is. Because like, I don't know if you ever made a zine, but that is fucking work. Like, This isn't work. This is obviously work, like a lot of work. And you and I both know how much work goes into editing. I think editing is the really unsung time suck
Yeah.
of the podcast thing. But yeah, like it really is this sort of like incredible, easy format to do compared to like putting out a record or putting out a zine. So I'm kind of like, every time I'm like, oh man, I got to stay up late doing this, I'm like, at least I'm not at a Kinko's trying to figure out how to scam them out of these photocopies.
Exactly. Yeah, and so I see what you do on Turned Out a Punk is like the oral history of punk, you know what I mean? So instead of like being like a book, being how it's like, please kill me, the oral history of so and so, it's like Turned Out a Punk, the oral history of punk in audio form. And so that's kind of like what I see you doing on your show so much, which is fabulous. And I'm curious about your specific interactions with members of Propaganda on your show and what that's been like for you to get their stories down and to get that recorded and out into the world for all to hear.
It's amazing because like I think anyone who grew up in, I don't know, punk rock in the 90s is obviously familiar with Propaganda, but I think there are many of us, and I'm sure you count yourself among this, that felt that this band was more than just a band. It was like a political awakening. And like, I know a lot of people got that from Rage Against the Machine or System of a Down or all these sorts of bands, which and not to invalidate those bands, because I think those bands are fine. It just wasn't what I listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Propaganda's approach to educating the fan base, and not everyone heard these messages, as they've kind of indicated to me in these interviews, was just so deep. Like, it's still something where I can go back and I can listen to stuff that I was like obsessed with in the 90s and get way more out of it now, as someone who's done a lot more reading, that's done a lot more living. Like there's stuff that they did back in the 90s that I'm still catching up to.
Yeah.
As an adult.
Yeah. What have you enjoyed about your conversations? I know you've had Chris and Todd on the show. Like, what are some of your
too.
Oh, and Jord too. So tell me about some of your takeaways from those specific conversations. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think Chris is, one of the greatest lyricists of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also he's got this real dry, kind of cutting sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And to sit there and talk to him about music, like the first interview I did with him, I think it's one of the best Turn Out of Punks I've ever gotten to do, just because like his way of encapsulating his life prior to hearing MDC, and then during the process of kind of like internalizing and trying to come to grips with what MDC had kind of laid out for him on this record, and then turning into a punk, I just thought was so profound.
Oh, yeah.
And it just hits like, like just to this day. And like, I remember sitting in my office, like on the phone with him, and I'd hung out with him a few times before this. But he was like, I'll get into it in a second, but he looms so large in my life. And was
Same.
Like such a, but so to have him say that, I remember just sitting in the office being like, fuck, this is why I do this thing. Like, this is exactly what I hope to get out of a conversation with him. Like, here's this guy that loved aggressive music, loved heavy metal, had and self-described kind of a fucked up worldview, certainly completely at odds with his worldview now.
Right.
And Jord played him MDC. He thought it sucked, and then got turned on to it after he thought about it for a while and went and bought the record, and it completely changed his life. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what I want this podcast to be. And I think like, I don't think I was extreme, as extreme politically to the right as he was, or as he kind of describes himself before my kind of punk awakening. And, and by the time I heard Propaganda, I'd already been in a punk for, like a year. It feels like a long time at that time, but like, not very long, but they kind of had the same effect on me, like just completely opened my eyes to stuff that I had never even considered. And like they're just amazing. And then Jord as well, like, obviously he's a, like a huge part of the Propaganda story. Like I think as much as Chris. And so I interviewed him at my brother's office, my brother who books the podcast.
Yeah.
Also a massive fan of Propaganda. He was like, hey, we got to interview Jord. And I'm like, okay, well, I got the kids home when Lauren was home at the time, my wife. And I'm like, there's no way I can record. He's like, okay, come by the office. So I went by the office where he works. He's a casting agent. And we did the interview in a casting studio.
Awesome.
And it was super fun. It was like, great. And once again, kind of very much the same sort of experience with punk rock and kind of the awakening it brought him. But I think Todd was different for me because, as much as I love Todd's stuff and Propaganda, for me, Todd is I Spy. And
Yeah.
I Spy is a band that I kind of like. I don't know if I like them as much as Propaganda or maybe even more some days than Propaganda, but they're just a band that is huge for me.
They're insanely important and they're so criminally overlooked. And what's so crazy to me is Todd Congealier from FYP has a stockpile of hundreds of I Spy 10 inches sitting in a warehouse in his office in California. And I was interviewing him and I was like, how many of those 10 inches do you have left? He's like, I don't know, hundreds. And I'm like, why is this 1994 10-inch from I Spy, Revenge of the Little Shits, not sold out and impossible to find? Like, it's crazy that you can buy one of those for $8 brand new from the original 94 pressing. It's just nuts.
It was in every record store.
Yeah.
Like that thing there, he must have pressed 5,000, 6,000 of those, because I remember as a kid, that was always around. The thing that everyone was looking for was the I Spy Propaganda split.
Yeah.
Which I think is their best material. Like I would put their side, the I Spy side of that split up against any Canadian punk record ever.
Nice.
I really do kind of rate it that high. And I think on an emotional level, like that thing is just, people talk about emo and whatever that is, but to me, that's true emotive hardcore. Like what they're doing there, like Todd, his vocals, it's like he's like bleeding on those tracks.
Oh yeah. Damian, hearing you in conversation with music obsessives on your podcast, like Jello Biafra comes to mind. Like it's one of the absolute joys of your podcast is like your encyclopedic knowledge of like things like demos and, very rare 7 inches and things like that. That's one of the main things that I take away as a listener from your show. And I have a pretty decent collection of Propaganda items. Like I have, the Kung Fu Daniel 7-inch, and I have got, a couple of those I Spy 10 inches, and I've got the Today's Empires on red. And I want to know what's in your Propaganda collection, because I think that that's such a cool avenue for you as a collector.
I don't have as much of an insane collection, I think, as a lot of people do for Propaganda. Like that's the problem with this punk thing. There are a couple bands that I think I'm like a completist on, but for the most stuff, I love so much of it that there's just only so many records you can have.
Yeah.
So I find, but they're, that being said, they are a band that I have kind of collected, pretty consistently when I found their stuff over the years. So I've got like, the 90 demo, the Boy Are We Lazy demo, which, I remember buying that off a friend way back when I bought his entire tape collection. I have the Birth fanzine, which came with the which to me is the weirdest Propaganda release because it's a Propaganda 3-way split with John Bartels and Sockeye. And Sockeye are a very infamous band that if you were going to map them on a political punk spectrum, or maybe not political because I don't want to, but certainly on a shocking and offensive punk spectrum, I think Propaganda and them would be on opposite ends of this thing.
Nice.
They are pretty wild, and I think to this day Propaganda is still shocked. The members that they're on the split, and that actually put together from two different people. Like I think I traded for the 3-way split on vinyl, and then bought someone's fanzine collection and found a fanzine without the 7-inch, and was like, oh shit. Complete.
Nice.
I think I've got the FYP split, like all the different versions of that came out. I used to have a test press of that, but I traded that away. I've got How to Clean a couple of things on a couple different colors of vinyl. Where Quality is Job 1, I think I have a few different colors of that, or 2 different colors of that. I don't have an I Spy split, which is
wow.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that's eluded me. I don't really buy records online, so I'm kind of yearning to find that in the wild one day. But I've had a couple times chances to buy it, but just never, timing was never right. So that's the one I'm still kind of looking for. Got some shirts actually. Chris O'Toole, who does Turn Out a Punk Footnotes with me, just gave me an old Propaganda shirt with have the Confederate flag guy in a gun sight on the back. I'm trying to think what else I've got. I definitely have like a couple of the LPs, but I don't think I have any crazy color vinyl. on that stuff.
Do you know what color of the Kung Fu Daniel birth zine that you have? Because there are 3 different colors, I believe.
I think, let me take it out right now. I pulled them to do this. A purple.
Nice. What's the can you look at the track listing on that Boy Are We Lazy demo? I'm curious if you could just like list that track listing.
Proud, White and Stupid, Pigs Will Pay, Ode to John, Die for the Flags, sorry. And then on side 2, The Farmer's Daughter Mod is the name of the side 2. It's Government Cartoons, Entertain Your Thoughts, and Change.
Okay, there are definitely a couple in there that I've never even listened to. Do you ever listen to that cassette, or is it something that you're like, this is old, it's delicate?
No, I ripped it. I did rip it at one point. I have no idea where that rip is at this point. But yeah, no, I've got a big project that I want to do this year is kind of figure out a way to start ripping some recordings, because there's certainly like not so much this stuff, where this stuff I think is floating out there in some capacity, but there's just, you know, other recordings that you wind up with over time where you're like you're saying, it's old, it's not a permanent medium. It's like you got to find some way to digitize this stuff. So that's my goal. If I do digitize it, I promise you guys will be the first people I send it to.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
Also, we have a weird I Don't Want to Grow Up comp tape, which came out of Mississauga. It was Skull Sessions, and this was the Skull Sessions. I think the fanzine was called Skull Sessions. Actually, I know it is because I have a copy of it.
Holy smokes.
And on this comp, it's just Die for the Flag and White, Proud, and Stupid. But also on this tape, it features the band Catharsis from the UK, which lead singer used to drive Fucked Up around. So that's our Propaganda deep connection on this comp tape.
Unbelievable. I love it. Okay, well, Damian, I'm going to just confess something to you right off the bat. I have procrastinated doing the state lottery episode for over a year, and I'll tell you why. We could have done it during the election last year, which would have been extremely timely. But I remember you were on Instagram Live like about a year ago, and I jumped on 20 of your Instagram Lives, and you were like just sitting there in your house, and you were answering some questions. And I said, "What's your favorite Propaganda song?" And you wrote, and you said, probably State Lottery. So in the back of my mind for the last year, I was like, I am not going to do State Lottery until I can talk to Damian Abraham. And I've like kind of like poked and prodded here and there, but like you have so many so many Twitter notifications at all times that those things go flying under the radar until they don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have a real affinity for that song, State Lottery. And go ahead. And I'm curious what you're thinking.
No, it's a huge song for me. It's funny you say that too, because I remember one time you tweeted me and we were talking. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
We were talking about coming on the show. We have a landline, and it's definitely just a telemarketer calling right now. But
oh, good.
Yeah, and I was like, what song would I want to do by Propaganda? And I'm like, definitely State Lottery.
Yeah.
And even though we did not get the tie-in of the American election, we are perfectly in time, if you get this out fast enough, for the Canadian election, which is coming up in a little less than a month now.
Nice.
So
well, that's good.
Yeah, very well timed for our election up here. And this is just a song that I like. I love this band, you know, but I think this song, when I heard it for the first time as, you know, a fan, just was on another level. And the lyrics for this thing still, like, talk about a song that you still kind of just catch up to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing, you know, as time has gone on, just how much more this song rings true. And, a huge song. Starts with the Noam Chomsky soundbite, which you know, they were the band that introduced me to Noam Chomsky.
Me too.
And, yeah, like, and it that is probably the most important thinker for me in my life, like philosopher. Like, he's still one that on tour, I'll just listen to audiobooks, I'll just listen to lectures, and I got to see him live one time even. Like, I was completely, you know, turned on to him through this band and this sample in particular, and I just the song is just so heavy. Listening to it yesterday on the drive home, forcing my kids to hear it, it's like you can't hear the song and not get a lump in your throat.
Yeah, you know, and what's so wild is, you know, I think about lines in this song, like you can hear the goose steps getting closer. And then I think about the United States from the years 2015 until, you know, today. And it's terrifying that this 1996 song continues to get more relevant as years go by instead of less relevant. Like, this is a song where I'm like, this is not how it's supposed to be. This song should not get more relevant. This should only be something that we laugh at as being like outdated and decades ago. Do you know what I mean?
It's wild that they wrote this in a pre 9/11 world,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I think the lyrics hit harder, like especially the lyrics frothing out the mouth at the mouth about the scapegoats they've chosen for us.
Yeah.
With every racist pointing finger, I can hear the goosebumps getting closer. Like I feel like that rings so much more true today. And maybe it's just my lack of experience and my lack of worldview and the amount of privilege I had, that I didn't really appreciate this in the 90s when I first heard it, in the same way. But I think now, like you're saying, it just rings more true. Like, this is
Yeah.
just, you can really see how this game works now.
Yeah, and I think about this opening as well. Does this seem strange to you? The confetti, the balloons, the mile-wide grins. So I'm picturing like the recent inauguration of the new U.S. President Joe Biden, and how like this inauguration was like going to be like this heralded, celebrated return to normalcy, blah blah blah, whatever that even means. And then seeing how the last several months since that, like the US continues to just spiral, it feels like, on any given day. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely crazy how we're so excited on this change, this new day of change. And then like we just continue to watch things just get crazier and crazier. And I was like, this is really nuts, just how vivid this opening image is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I don't think I ever asked Chris about it, but I'm sure this was the inauguration of Clinton, watching that go down, and just like how everyone's smiling, and you're right, like everyone's so happy, and it's like they won something, and the reality is they didn't win anything. The reality is they should be scared, like he says, like they should be scared about the job they've got to do now. But like the reality is, like, of course they're not scared of the job they got to do now, because they're not there to do that work. I watched this. I just put up an episode with Charlie Angus, who's a New Democratic Party member of parliament here, which is the most left-wing mainstream party we have in Canada, which is definitely far more left and progressive than the Democrats would be. Yeah, I'm sure you've talked about this before many times. So
yeah,
I know you have talked about this, I should say, many times. But anyway, so Charlie Angus was on the show, and I just watched this clip of him talking about the water crisis in First Nations communities across Canada, and just how it hasn't been addressed, and there's no movement on this stuff. And because the game is not them fixing this, the game is them talking about it and playing this up as an issue. Like, they don't want to make people's lives better, because they could, like we all know they could, and that's what I think this song really hits home.
Yeah, and solving problems. This is something I think about in the U.S. context a lot. That solving problems reduces the amount of rage that you can stoke in your followers, and that won't win elections. So, like, if you go out there and you fix everything, then you don't have really anything to stoke the ire of people who might vote for you, and you don't have anything to insult the other side on. So it's just one of those things that, like, we keep not fixing things on purpose so that the people in power can run on a system of rage, and where you enrage people to vote against other people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it's very much, and it's hard to talk about this stuff because there are still fundamental issues that, I think do separate these quote unquote two sides, like that are important, freedom of choice, like these sorts of things, even though they are largely talking points, and they can be used as just I don't know, like an issue, that like a scapegoat issue, in the sense that it just absolves the party of all the other guilt they have for other things, because they are on the right side of this one in particular issue. But I think these things do matter. But at the same time, like, they are, it's a system that runs on money. Like, I think we all know that. Like, how much money does it cost to become a U.S. president? How much money does it cost to become a Canadian prime minister?
It's wild.
It's wild, and it's just not. It's not about what these bodies should be there to do.
Right,
at this
right.
point. Like, I think, but now they've sold us, they sold off all the splints. And, oh no, sorry. Our broken bones, our bleeding limbs. And now they've sold off all the splints and contracted out the tourniquets. Like this idea that like we've been broken by the state and it's controlled by these corporations, by this
Yeah.
big money and stuff. And that's what Noam Chomsky showed me as a young
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the last year and a half or so of the pandemic as well, about all the debates about finding proper PPE and like states bidding against each other to get proper gear for their medical hospitals and staff and things like that. And it's just really intensely overwhelming to think about how much of the world is stacked against actual people. And you mentioned Canada a couple times. I'm so grateful because you're just right across the border from me. You're up in Toronto and I'm over here in Buffalo. So we're really only like 2 hours apart. And
separated by a border and a mighty taco.
Yeah, dude, mighty taco. Who just rolled out the Impossible meat tacos as well.
What?
Yep, they got mighty Impossibles down here now.
I loved the vegetarian taco. Was my favorite thing in the world, which is just like that processed slice of cheese, sour cream, the sauce, the lettuce, and the tomatoes.
Yeah.
I remember actually. Do you remember the Mighty Taco right around the corner from the Showplace Theater, right by the IGA or IGA?
I do. Yeah.
We used to go there, and it was like when there were shows there. It was like I remember walking in, Scott Vogel like holding court, like just talking to all these people, like or like going in there, and they're all sick of it all, eating Mighty Taco. Like that place to me was like what Okie Dog would have been to another generation of kids in LA. Like that
Amazing.
was like the spot. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry. It's fine. So anyway, so we've got the, we're not that far away, you know what I mean? Like geographically. And so I'm embroiled in this like American election rage cycle, but it doesn't seem like your rage cycle is as intense, 20 minutes away across the border. Can you comment on that at all?
Well, I think we've got a very different system here, right?
Yeah.
Like Canada's like, in a weird way, a lot less democratic than America because we only vote for one level of government because of the fact that we were a British colony here, or Canada's stolen land. The Canadian government still has all these ceremonial positions, which would be the American executive, like our Senate and our head of state, which is our governor general here. Those are all ceremonial positions that used to be decided by England or the Crown and are now decided by whoever the prime minister is. In the Senate, you're appointed for life, which is fucking crazy.
Wow.
The senators that are appointed to the ceremonial position paid, I believe it's in excess of six figures. I'm sure it's in excess of six figures. Well, in excess of six figures at this point. And these are all just, patronage, political appointment patronages. And so, and then if there's like, years ago we had the goods and services tax, which was like a giant retail tax that came across Canada. And the Liberal government at the time was trying to block the Conservative government from putting this in. And so the Conservative government just appointed a bunch of new senators. They just made a bunch of new Senate seats and put in new people for life that we're now still paying salaries for so that they could pass this piece of legislation. And then everything is basically rubber stamped by the Governor General, who would never at this point stand up to the prime minister because they're picked by the prime minister instead of, England. So it is weirdly less democratic. Also, because of the way we have a parliamentary system, you don't actually vote for your prime minister. You vote for your local person. And if you're lucky, your local person is part of the winning party and their leader will become the prime minister, right? So I think our rage is kind of like diffused a little bit. Like we don't have we do have a national story in the sense that we do have a prime minister that's ultimately our head of government. But at the same time, I can't affect Trudeau's place in Canadian government.
Wow.
All I can do is vote for my local person and hope that, eventually the NDP makes up the Canadian government. But, I don't hold out. I'm cautiously optimistic, but, realistically pessimistic, I think.
Gotcha. Holy smokes.
Sorry, I get a little. This is actually a big issue for me, and I don't really like talking about it because it's so fucking boring.
Yeah, no, it's hard too. It's hard
Yeah.
work.
We don't
but
vote for our judges here. We don't vote for sheriffs, like none of that stuff. That's all appointments. So
I mean, it's so wild too if you think about this song and what that means for individual people, and understanding what that means if you're Canadian versus what that means if you're American versus what that means if you're Brazilian. You could take this song and put these lyrics over the top of any country just about, and you can have your own interpretation of it, which is so powerful. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, like I think anytime you see someone win an election, like no one's, maybe this has happened, and I shouldn't say no one, but I've never seen someone come out the night they win and be like, hey, thank you for voting for me, but we got a lot of fucking work to do.
Yeah.
So we're not going to have a party tonight. I'm going to see everyone early tomorrow morning, and we're going to get to fucking work.
I love it.
Like that would blow my mind if someone did that. And of course, no one's going to do that because, they gotta, this party is like a bought and paid for celebration. This is all the people that paid contributions celebrating, like we're set for the next 4 years or for whatever the next term is, because our guy's in power. So let's party. Let's cut loose tonight.
Well, so Damian, I want to shift gears for just a second and talk about the music of this song. So we have a very particular sound of recording here. That Less Talk More Rock record from Ryan Green has a really particular production style. There's a really
sound.
Yeah, there's a really particular bass guitar sound on this record. I'm wondering what
drums too.
Yeah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on either the musical composition or the production or anything that springs to mind when you're thinking about either just this song or this record, etc.
Well, I think in starting off with this song, like this song is to me like the first two Propaganda records have a song like this, like "Who Will Help Me Break This Bread."
Yep,
is this song on the first record, and then this is this song on this record, where this is the song where there is a tonal shift. Like they are kind of like I don't know, like it's a lot more melancholy now. It's a lot more aggressive too, I guess, at the same time. Like where this is like there's almost like a sense of humor to other songs on the record, even when they're serious. Whereas this song is just straightforward and driving. In the same way, "Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread" is. I think the thing that I love about this song, and I think the thing that really makes this song, is I believe it's George. I'm sure it's George. Backing vocals with this like high pitched thing that just like adds this punctuation on parts of the song that I think are perfect. I'm weird. Like I don't know music at all. Like I can't play anything.
I love it.
I can't do shit in the studio. Like I really am limited to what you see is what you get with me when it comes to music.
Yeah.
So I don't really, I think, have the same hangups on holy shit, is this recorded poorly? Because to me, the recording is the recording. Like that record, if that record was recorded by Steve Albini, like while I love to fantasize about what that would sound like, it wouldn't be that record.
Right.
So, in the same way I love all the Mystic recordings, which people historically have described as being like an abomination and like ruining music, I love those recordings because those recordings are those recordings. And I feel the same way about all the Ryan Green stuff. Like I can hear what people complain about, but to me it's like, yeah, but I kind of think that's what makes this record. And this record being done by someone else wouldn't be this record. And while it's fun to think about, it's I don't know. I can't separate it from the person doing it.
Nice. Do you have any awesome stories of seeing Propaganda live, either when you were, very young or all throughout the years into adulthood? I'm curious about your experiences of like just being a fan and watching them play.
Yeah, the first time they came to Toronto, they never came, and it feels like they never came. It was probably like a period of 2 years that people were really wanting them to come, that they didn't come. But it felt like everyone came to Toronto at that time, especially at that time. And I remember interviewing Diesel Boy for the fanzine that my brother and I did back then that never came out, Drunken Box Kicking.
Yeah.
And the guys from Diesel Boy kind of talking shit on Propaganda,
Ooh.
being super successful. I don't want to say talking shit because like I'm a little kid and I'm trying to remember this from like, 20 some odd years later, 26 years later. But at the same time, like I remember them being kind of salty about how popular Propaganda was. And like, there's just so much mystique around this band, and this is in a pre-internet world. So you'd see that there was a video I remember where Chris would be playing and the camera pulls out and he's naked and his friend jumps on and gives him a hug on the stage at some point or something. I remember seeing that video. There's another video we saw that was super grainy and hard to make out. And then we had heard the story, and I think they might have had this even sampled on a record, about him bashing the Nazis' head in with the mic stand.
Yeah.
And you know, and so we just like, this guy must be fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And there were stories that like they will not talk to you if you're wearing leather shoes, or worse. You know, like there was just like this, you know, like, oh, they're super militantly straight edge. They're hardline. And at the time, like now, as someone who spends way too much time reading and thinking about and studying this stuff, I know that how crazy that was to describe them as a hardline band. But at the time, I had no conception of what hardline was. So they were like a hardline band. People were like, they're militantly straight edge. They will beat you up. They will beat you up if they see you with a beer in your hand. And so prior to them coming to town, there was just this mystique and question about like who this band was and like what were they going to be like when they finally showed here. So they did this, I guess anyone that was around at the time, celebrated tour. I'm going to say it was 96, maybe just before 97. And they played, maybe I'm screwing up my years. No, I think I'm going to stay by that. And they played like every single town around Ontario. They played like you could have seen if you had a car. So it must have been 96, because none of my friends were really driving at this point. You could have seen them, I don't know, every single night for a couple weeks, because they were playing like Hamilton, which is an hour from Toronto. They were playing Oshawa, which is an hour from Toronto. They played Ajax. You know, they played like every single town.
Love it.
So we went and saw them the first time in Oshawa. They played with this band called Closet Monster. I think there was before they were even called Closet Monster. Actually, it definitely was. Closet Monster is relevant because it definitely was I'm trying to remember what the pre-Closet Monster band name was. But anyway, this band is relevant because part of the band would wind up being in Sum 41.
Oh, wow.
Part of the band would wind up becoming part of Avril Lavigne's band at a later date. So Closet Monster also put out some records on Universal Records in the early 2000s, and they went on. The lead singer became the head of Universal Records for a short time period as well. But they actually did the show. The lead singer did the show, Mark Spikulik, London. I'm sorry if I'm fucking up his last name. He promoted that show, and we saw them play. Todd was in the band now. It was the first time Todd. So it must have been just after John had left, because no one really knew that Todd was going to be in the band. I think the only new song they really did on that tour was Fuck the Border. Like, I mean, stuff that would be on the next record. And it was incredible. Like, it was amazing that night. And then the next few days later, they played Toronto, and they did 2 nights in Toronto at the El Macombo, which is a 2-story club. The first floor, that was the first night, and that night was booked by a kind of like a hardcore promoter. And so the bands they played with were Grade, Blake, and this ska band called Jersey that was members of the band Grade, that wound up being on Fueled by Ramen later on.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. That I was like, that sounds really familiar. I was thinking that as you were saying that.
Yeah, and actually, Grade invented screamo, and I know people will be like, no, there's screamo before that, but I mean like screamo in the sense that we think of it with like poppy vocals and then some guy yelling on top of it.
Yeah,
I really do credit Grade with that innovation.
Oh, dude, like what is the record? Under the
Magnets.
Yeah. Oh my God. And then like Head First Straight to Hell is amazing. And then what was the other one? Under the Radar.
Yeah. Separate the Magnets. No, they had one. I'm trying to remember what the very first one was called. Because there was,
and I'm trying to remember their Victory record, their first Victory records.
This was before that era. This is when they were still like full on, like Kyle was wearing like a sweater on stage, and he still had the dreadlocks at this point.
Oh yeah.
And it was full on. Like that show was also, it's kind of my first time experiencing like a true DIY show. Like I've been to DIY shows before, but they had been like Epitaph sounding bands or ska punk bands or like, like just kids putting on shows. Like this was like the first time I went to like a capital DIY type show where like there was a Food Not Bombs table and there was like an AK press table with someone, handing out pamphlets as well about upcoming protests and things like that. And it was like, I was like, oh, this is what I want to be a part of. Like, not necessarily the music, but that kind of feeling of community was so different from the sort of more skate punk, popular punk scene that I was coming out of at the time. And then the next night they played upstairs and they played with all the Toronto popular punk bands of the time, like Five Knuckle Chuckle, who feature, they were the band that got Edge, the professional wrestler, into music.
Wow.
When they stole a Nirvana CD for him from Sunrise Records way back when. Edge told me this story, so I'm not snitching on anyone.
Nice.
And then they played with Marilyn's Vitamins, who was kind of a really popular punk band in the time in Toronto, and the Tire Kickers as well. I got wasted that night and didn't make it to the show and spent all my money in a McDonald's. And I think that led me to going straight edge. So I only got to see the very first night.
I love it.
Very pivotal night for me, that whole thing.
Amazing.
They played here the night after Josh and Mike from Fucked Up got arrested for they evicted a sort of right-wing provincial politician here in Toronto who was evicting a lot of poor people at the time from his office with a group called OCAP, a anti-poverty activist group in Toronto or in Ontario, the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty. And they all got arrested. And then they came to the Propaganda show that night right after they got arrested. And I think that was right around the time they formed Fucked Up. And at that Propaganda show, they had someone from OCAP come out and speak before they played. And I remember that show being incredible. It was just after Today's Empires came out, and it packed to the rafters at this place called the Opera House. And they were just, that record at the time I didn't really appreciate and got into it kind of afterwards. And I really do think that might be, for me, the record for that band.
Amazing. Have you seen them recently? When was the last time you saw them?
I'm trying to think when the last time I saw them. I guess it would have been a few years ago. Actually, it would have been more than a few years ago now. It would have been about 10 years ago. Like they played Toronto a few times, and it's always been when I've been out of town. Like I would never miss them if I was in
right.
town.
Yeah.
Just because of touring and things like that, unfortunately. Like, and we don't really wind up playing on the same sorts of festivals ever.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
Have you seen them with Sileno, or was the last time with Beeve?
It was with Beeve.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Me too.
I think that was a tour they did. I remember they were bringing their own PA around with them. And it was so loud.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember the name of the club in Toronto. It's no longer there, and it was not a great spot for shows. But it was this place that was around for a short while. But I remember them bringing their own PA in. They might have just done one night, might have been two. But they're a band that, obviously every time they play here, it's packed to the rafters and people are still going nuts. I was going to say kids, but I think we're all mainly adults, unfortunately, at this point.
Yeah. Well, Damian, I'm wondering, just as a general takeaway, like kind of what this band means to you, just as somebody who is so in love with music, such as yourself. Like, why does this band matter so much to you? How do you hold them special, sort of in your heart?
I think they're the band's band. I think they're a band that we should all aspire to try and be like in a band in a way. I think they're a band that's constantly evolving. Chris talks about how there's lyrics that he wrote that he no longer stands by. And that he's learned a lot of stuff since he wrote these songs, 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Close to 30 years ago in some cases. He is, or definitely over 30 years in some cases. He, and I feel that they, as a band, also just are unbelievable live. Like every time I've seen them live, they put on that show, and they've always just been those people. Like I feel as a young person, when I did finally meet them at that show, and they didn't eat me alive, like they were just like, hey, thanks, nice to meet you. Like, and they were just nice people, and then getting to know them over the years, seeing them at shows or in Winnipeg when Fucked Up has played there and stuff. Like, yeah, they just are a band that I really look up to, in a scene where I don't look up to a lot of bands.
I love that. I mean, Damian, this is so awesome to hear your thoughts on this band. And because like I love the fact that you have talked to, Todd and Chris and Jordan on your show. So you have these like sustained personal interactions with them where you can kind of like assess their personalities interpersonally, not just through what we hear on records. You know what I mean? So like I love the fact that you've had these personal interactions and have walk away still feeling like that. Even as we like are in our late 30s and 40s, like this, they still continue to inspire me just like they inspire you. And I'm just really grateful to you for sharing your story here today.
Oh, I appreciate that. I really do. Actually, I forgot about a show that I didn't get to see, but probably my favorite video ever to watch of Propaganda, the Propaganda Left for Dead show. I don't know if that's ever come up on here.
Oh yeah, it has. Yeah. Tell me about your thoughts on it real quick.
That video where their bands are beefing with each other and Chris Callahan's making all the jokes about Propaganda, and then Propaganda gets on stage and starts sassing them, and they're like shouting out Shoulder, who wind up becoming the Constantines.
Yeah.
But they're like that. Oh my gosh. I used to love that video. And to me, it was amazing because I loved all those bands. And to me, punk was all those bands. So to watch them fight, and it's the thing that was wild, like certain members of Left for Dead aside, who have become really fucked up politically, but like especially in the case of Chris, like Chris Callahan, I'm talking about, who's the other big influence on me, I think, as a vocalist. Like here are the two twin towers of Chris in my life as influences on me in music, battling it on stage, virtually the same person. Like if they were off stage talking to each other, like their entire fight comes down to Fat Records, which I would argue that both of them didn't like in kind of the same way, especially in a few more years for Chris Hanna. But I think I love that video because of that. Like to me, that's also why I wanted to doing Turn Out a Punk, is because I can bring those worlds together for people that I think those people don't even see how close they are to each other.
Absolutely fabulous. Well, Damian Abraham, Turned Out a Punk, Fucked Up. Thank you so much for your participation in this podcast project, hearing your stories and, just getting your thoughts on this very special band. It truly means the world to me. And I'm so grateful to you that you're willing to jump online with me for a while and hang out.
I can't thank you enough. And you guys do an incredible job with this thing. Like, it's really like it's a celebration of, like probably the greatest Canadian punk band ever, like I think, if I'm being honest. So thank you for the work.
Could I have hit the nail much harder on the head? It's from its people lives. They are motivated by greed. First they taught us to depend on their nation states to mend our tired minds, our broken bones, our bleeding limbs. And now they sold off all the splits and contracted out the tourniquets. And if we jump through hoops, then we might just survive. Is this what we deserve? From the palace floors to fight amongst ourselves as we scramble for the crumbs they spit out, frothing at the mouth about the scapegoats that they've chosen for us with every racist pointed finger.
All right. Thank you so much, Damian. That meant a ton. And Damian and I, we connected on Twitter DMs like in the morning, one random weekday, and he was home without his kids. And he was like, "Can you record in 30 minutes?" I'm like, "Yes, I can." And I completely rearranged my entire morning.
Great.
And I just did it because I knew that was the time to do it. I knew it had to happen. So the conversation with Damian about Canadian elections, of which we now know the results. Damian and I talked about that election in the conversation. And now we know that Trudeau has, and the Liberals have won a minority government. And that was super cool to hear Damian kind of geek out about his thoughts on the Canadian electoral process. I love conversations like that when little magical moments happen. And it was so amazing to connect with Damian also. I look up to him a lot and the work that he does. So I view the conversations we have on this podcast as a type of oral history documentation, and Damian's Turned Out a Punk is a show that shows me what is possible within oral history in podcasting. So Damian's kind of like one of my pod heroes. So it's just fabulous to have him on the show.
Well, Greg, I'm stoked that you were able to have that opportunity. I know you've been talking behind the scenes for that possibility for a while. So when you text me, I was really happy for you. So
yeah,
let's hear about our second guest.
So our second guest is the return of Aaron Scott from Attica, Marathon, and De La Hoya. Everybody who listens to this show will remember Aaron's appearance for the Hadron Collision episode a while back. And I had Aaron back because he did a cover of State Lottery for the Under the Influence Volume 14 7-inch series, which came out on Suburban Home Records and Vinyl Collective in 2011 in a split with the band Ruiner. And Ruiner covered Morning Glory. Aaron and Attica covered the State Lottery. So if anybody hasn't heard this, you're going to hear it in just a second. But the 7-inch is available on Discogs for like $2. And I have a copy on reddish pinkish vinyl, and it's really cool. So Aaron was here on Hadron, and he was kind enough to join me to chat about the State Lottery again. So we talked about his cover, the adaptation process, what he went through to make this cover, his collaboration for the 7-inch, the artwork of Mitch Clem, and more. So I should also say that since Aaron was last here, De La Hoya has been releasing some unearthed tunes, which you can find at delahoya.bandcamp.com. So without further delay, please enjoy the return of Aaron Scott of Attica, Marathon, and De La Hoya. But let's kick it off with Aaron's cover of the State Lottery.
Does it seem strange to you? Confetti, the balloons, the mile-wide grins, a victory dance to welcome in the air to a state of disrepair. Sure seems strange to me. They're acting like they won the lottery. Shouldn't they feel terror at the task that lies ahead? The beaten house of people, the system's left for dead. Could I have hit the nail much harder on the head? It's profits before lives. They are motivated by greed. First they taught us to depend on our nation states to mend our tired minds, our broken bones, our bleeding limbs. And now they've sold off all the flinch and contracted out the tourniquets. And if we jump through hoops, then we might just survive. First they taught us to depend on our nation states to mend our tired minds, our broken bones, our bleeding limbs. And they sold off all the splints and contracted out the tourniquets. And if we jump through hoops, and if we jump through hoops, and if we jump through hoops, then we might just survive. It's what we deserve. Scrap the pallid floors and fight amongst ourselves as we scramble for the crumbs they spit out, frothing at the mouth about the scapegoats that they've chosen for us. With every racist pointing finger, I hear the new steps are getting closer. They no longer represent us. It is not our obligation to get right this tyranny, to get right this tyranny. Does it seem strange to you? Confetti, the balloons of my wide grins. It sure seems strange to me. It sure seems strange to me.
Hey, Aaron, welcome back to Unscripted Moments. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back.
So we're going to have a little chat today on something that you did for Attica. In 2011, you released a split 7-inch for covering the state lottery, and the band that you shared the split 7-inch with was Ruiner, who did Morning Glory. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about this Suburban Home split 7-inch covers series and how you got involved with this project.
Yeah, the label was putting out, I don't know how frequently, but they were putting out split 7-inches of bands that would cover a song of a band that had influenced their songwriting. And so, and then they would put out like a parody cover, like artwork as part of the 7-inch. And so Ruiner had been lined up for this, and they asked me to join them, and I had to figure out who I wanted to cover. I didn't even have, I don't think any of my music had been released on vinyl at that point, so I was like, oh yeah, great, I can get a 7-inch out of the deal. You know,
Nice.
And so, and I think they already had their song in the can, so I just had to push forward and make my selection and record my song.
Nice. So I have the 7-inch right here, and do you remember what the artist's name is who does this 7-inch cover?
Yeah, it's Mitch Clem.
Fantastic. I've liked Mitch Clem's artwork in the past, and I think that he's done a whole bunch of stuff that other people can check out, but it's really fantastic. And I'm looking at it here, and it's got the tone and the feel of the Let's Talk LP, even down to the words that go around the perimeter of the cover, where it's like pro hockey, Canada friendly, Rosh Hashanah. What else does it say? Pro awesome, anti nowhere league, pro bono, tastes great, less filling, anti negativity, pro pagandy.
Right.
Did you do all of that on the cover, or was all of that Mitch's idea? I
didn't even know what the cover was going to be. I mean, like, I knew it was going to be a spoof cover, but I didn't know that it was going to be me falling off a bike, which I thought was a really funny take on the original cover. Yeah, so I didn't have anything to do with it, but it turned out great.
And hilariously, I'd imagine that the cover has you falling off the bike because of the Ditch the Van tour that Attica had done, where you got a lot of coverage. But we also talked about Hadron collision on your last appearance on the podcast.
Yeah.
And so this is like connected to that. It's all thematically connected back to Hadron collision and riding bikes, I feel like, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
It's all tied together. So why did you choose State Lottery as your cover that you did for this covers series?
Yeah, when I was thinking about bands that influenced my songwriting, certainly political bands were on the table. There was an additional layer with Propaganda, which is their songwriting structures and how they very rarely repeat anything. And if there's a totally sweet part, you got to go back and listen to the song again. A lot of the other bands that I was listening to and considering who fit the bill were still basically writing pop song structures. And so, I mean, they were still playing punk music, but a lot of verse, chorus, guitar solo, chorus, and I haven't really written songs that way very often, although what I would do is just change the words to the chorus, which still follow, if I had choruses, which still follows in the Propaganda tradition of alienating the audience or the listener. It's very hard to sing along. You have to be a total super fan to sing along to a chorus differently each time. So I landed on State Lottery because I think Let's Talk was like the most eye-opening album of theirs relative to where I was in my music listening and songwriting. I was just starting to write songs with De La Hoya when I found that record. And State Lottery is just it's so to the point and simple. It really just asks a question and answers it, and I really like that.
Nice. The adaptation that you did is really wonderful because it starts off pretty similarly, I feel like, to your LP Dead Skin Dried Blood, where it's like very somber and very quiet, and you have that really low croon that I really like about your vocals that you do. And but then it gets super raucous and really wild and almost reminds me at points of like Gogo Bordello and stuff like that. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about the adaptation process, how you went about going through this. Tell me about the percussion that you utilize, because it's a party when the song gets going. So tell me about your adaptation process.
I mean, when doing a cover song, it's my opinion that like covers that are devotional covers usually don't work that well, because it's like, unless your band has a very unique sound and you do a devotional cover, but it's like, oh, this is it still has a uniqueness to it, but it's like, what's the point if you cover a really I don't know, seminal band and you just replay their song? It's not that interesting. So I wanted to do something in a different genre right off the bat. And most of the Attica music is kind of in the folk punk vein. And I started with a cover just doing like acoustic guitar and vocals, which a lot of the recording I was doing at the time was similar to that. And it was fine. And that's what those pieces are on there. But Chris Antal, who I recorded all of Dead Skin Dried Blood with, and a lot of the extra instrumentation on there is his. He is a really fantastic instrumentalist. He was just sitting at home listening to it one day, and he had a djembe drum hanging out, and he said, oh, what if I just started playing this drum with mallets underneath? What's going on? And so he put that whole thing together in a couple passes, and it really just takes the energy to a listenable and fun level, and I think does some justice to the amount of energy in the original song.
So did you have like almost like a finished version of just you with your guitar before Chris had that kind of like epiphany moment?
Yeah.
Awesome. So did you consider it done, and he was just like listening back to some things that he was like mixing and working on?
No, I was playing around with actual like piano leads over top of it, but that was like just kind of simple piano leads. But that was definitely taking the song in a different direction. And I found this song on YouTube earlier this week when I knew we were going to be talking about this, and there's some comment that just says, "I hate this," and, which I fully expected, right?
Yeah.
And from some people at least, I think I would have gotten a few more "I hate this" comments on it if I had gone with the piano rather than the percussion. It just didn't feel like, even though I was going for something different, it didn't feel like the right type of remix on a Proper Gandhi song.
Nice. Well, and I know that Frank Turner has done a couple covers of State Lottery live over the years, and his version it's very guitar and singing. So like there are versions like the one that you were originally going to do that exist elsewhere as well. Do you know what I mean? So people want your version, like the djembe drum and the raucous Gogo Bordello feel, they can listen to you. If they want the acoustic simplistic, like the simplified stripped down acoustic version, they can listen to Frank Turner. If they want the banger version, they can just listen to Propaganda. So it's like it adds a different availability of song feels and styles to this particular song if people are looking for covers of it. So like it's like multiple things that are out there.
Right.
So yeah. Well, we just had an election a few millennia ago, it feels like at this point.
Sure.
Tell me your reflection on State Lottery after the 2020 election cycle and why this song matters to you.
Well, we never got our confetti moment, right? Not that that's a loss for me, but the opening lines, the confetti, the balloons. I mean, that just didn't happen. But what I think is interesting about this song, like a lot of propaganda songs, I don't know if you talk too much about the sound clips they use, but I mean, every time you listen to the song, you have to listen to Noam Chomsky talk about democracy for like 15 or 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts with the real prospect for authentic democracy. And if anybody is, at least who lives in the United States, listens to this and they are still believing that we have, the greatest democracy in the world, or what, whatever the going line is, they have to engage that. And what do you mean authentic democracy? And I mean, this election cycle, they're just doing the quiet parts out loud now. I mean, it's the absolutely incompetent attempts at a coup, which I'm grateful for, that they're incompetent, are just an extension, in my opinion, of longstanding attempts at voter disenfranchisement. They used to focus more on doing that before the election, and now they're trying to do it out, like rewrite it after the election. But there's no honestly saying that we live in a quote authentic democracy, as Noam Chomsky would say, especially now. And I think a lot of people who maybe used to believe that are really appreciating the truth of it as they're watching how things continue to unfold. I mean, the election ended quite some time ago.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a few people in the government right now who, if they were president right now and they wanted to go full coup, who are much smarter than the president, but who are easily just as evil, if not more so. I'm like, man, all it would take is notching up the intelligence one level, and then things could really go haywire. It's scary.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in other parts of the world. So, I mean, there's no reason where we're above that, or that we've ever been above it. The other part of this song that I think really resonates with 2020, because the themes are unfortunately evergreen, are the talk about scapegoats. When this song was written, I assume it was written in 95 or 96. At least in the US, there was the scapegoating of young Black men was very prominent, as always. Now they've cast the net wider, and they're using racism, but they're also using, homophobia, and they're using xenophobia, and they're also just like making everybody afraid of anybody you can call a liberal, like whoever you can lump under that. And so the scapegoating is just turned up to 11, and it's working.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, this is such an interesting cover that you made for the state lottery. This is such a cool 7-inch, and you've got a lengthy piece of writing on the inside of it as well. So if anybody out there is listening and has this 7-inch or can track down a copy of it, it's definitely worth getting. And I appreciate your return appearance on Unscripted Moments to talk about another fantastic propaganda song that you have adapted. So it is just wonderful to have your participation and energy and collaboration to hang out with us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Greg.
First they taught us to depend on their nation states to men. Our tired minds, our broken bones, our bleeding limbs.
Okay, thank you so much, Aaron. It's fabulous to have you back on the podcast. Thank you for letting us put your song in the episode. And that's just an awesome thing to have it when people come back on the show as well, because like whenever we talk to Sue Lynn or Chris or Beeve, we've kind of built these little connections. And Chris Deutsch, for goodness sakes, we have these like new friendships that we've almost built, and it's just so awesome to have people on the podcast with whom we already have a rapport. So having Aaron back on is a real thrill for me, because it's just like kind of reconnecting with somebody that I've kind of become pals with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Greg. And two, we get to do this every week. And
I
I
know.
guarantee that if I had a one-time shot, I would think of a lot to say later on that I would miss and then would want to like go back and add in. So having the chance to like talk and share thoughts about, such an important band a few times, I think is there's one conversation is never enough, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Greg, our hat trick. Well, who is our third guest?
Oh boy. So our third and final guest on this episode is Michael Sileno. Michael has become a pal of ours on social media. He is well known in our Twitter account for having the username The State Lottery. So we are literally talking to the person who has had the State Lottery, as his username since AOL Instant Messenger days. Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this is so Michael is also the vocalist of the North Carolina-based hardcore band Night Sweats. And this is his favorite song of all time. So his band Night Sweats recorded a totally sweet cover of this tune, which you're going to hear before my chat with Michael. And I'm super pumped that we connected with Michael on Twitter ages ago. He's been one of the coolest listener friends we've had. And so it was really great to get him on the show to hang out. So here is Night Sweats doing the State Lottery, and then enjoy my chat with vocalist Michael Sileno.
The fact is, we live in a system that Sheldon Wolin calls inverted totalitarianism. It's a system where corporate power has seized all of the levers of control. There is no way to vote against the interests of Goldman Sachs or ExxonMobil or Raytheon. We've lost our privacy. We've seen under Obama an assault against civil liberties that has outstripped what George W. Bush carried out. We have bailed out the banks, pushed through programs of austerity. This has been a bipartisan effort because they've both been captured by corporate power. We have undergone what John Ralston Saul correctly calls a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion, and it's over.
Michael Sileno, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hello, great to be here. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Greg.
Awesome. Well, Michael, we've been chatting for so long on social media, as we were saying earlier. Right when we started the podcast, you sort of came onto my radar because of your wonderful username in all of your social media handles, the State Lottery. But before we get into that, I'm wondering if you can introduce yourself a little bit to the audience so they can learn about who you are and what you do.
Great. Michael Sileno from Greensboro, North Carolina. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. Love music, all kinds of music, but especially punk and hip hop. I played drums, been in bands since I was a teenager. vinyl collector, tech nerd.
Yeah.
I have, yeah, for sure. I have a BA in sociology with a concentration in anthropology from NC State, which we'll probably get into because that was influenced by this band in some way for sure.
Excellent.
And then I got my master's in sociology at UNC Greensboro, and I'm currently working on my master's of science and technology management at North Carolina A&T, and actually I currently work there too as an IT project manager. So
awesome. And I know that you're in I know you're in some bands as well, right?
yes, correct. Currently in Night Sweats, where I do vocals, which is the first time I've ever done that. And then I'm also in a newer project that we're just getting kind of started on the last few months, playing drums on that. But I was in a band called Alley with an Eye from like 2000 to 2005, and that was by far the most active, and did some touring and met a lot of people, in the scene that we're still friends with. So, yeah.
Right on, man.
Definitely been involved in any way I can, even going to shows for sure.
Well, so Michael, as I mentioned earlier, you caught my eye on social media because whenever we started up our Propaganda Pod Instagram and Twitter pages, I went through Twitter, and I have this habit where I crack a beer or get a slice of pizza or something, and I just type the word propaganda into Twitter, and I just see what pops up, and I just go through, and if it's a fun, cool person, not like somebody misusing the words of propaganda, like against like some kind of like other kind of agenda, which happens a lot. So you have to be careful what kind of propaganda tweets you actually like, because there's things that misrepresent what they're about. And so anyway, you came on my radar because your username on Instagram, Twitter is the State Lottery, which is the song that we're here to talk about in the episode that we're doing together. And I just want to start a little bit by asking how you first got into Propaganda's music. Like, when did they come into your life, and how did that fandom develop?
Sure. Actually, real quick, though, that's interesting you said that about your experience with social media, because I had that happen recently with this very song.
Oh, wow.
And misrepresenting it with the pandemic and like government fascism for mask wearing and things like that. So I can relate to that.
That's wild, man.
It just like my head almost exploded.
Yeah.
So about the getting into this band and the background there. So I guess I was probably 15, 1995 when I first heard Propaganda. And it was actually in a more fleeting way. I remember vividly being in a car with my cousin's friends coming home from school, probably a Friday, and everybody's, doing teenage wildness.
Oh yeah,
driving around, and Anti-Manifesto came on, and I just vividly remember that in the scene and the energy and all that. But it was still like in a fun kind of, nobody of those guys were into politics or anything like that. So it wasn't until Less Talk More Rock came out that it just hit me. It rocked me. It changed everything. It was a game changer for me musically, but also personally. And it was something that I was seeking, and it almost feels like it was made for that reason, just if I take it selfishly. Just sitting down and listening to that and taking it in at the time where I was questioning a whole lot around me and interested in these things on the fringe, and then this just sucked me in and brought me in. And this band always has spoken to me that way, in a way that I feel like they're talking at me and to me. So that's really kind of how I was introduced. But when, and knew who they were and loved that album for what it is at the time, and for even still I listen to it, Had to Clean Everything, but it was really Less Talk More Rock that did it.
Nice. Did you, whenever you heard Anti-Manifesto come on in that friend's car after school, did you like go out and get the record right away? Did you have somebody like make a dubbed cassette for you? Like, did you like actively pursue finding that music because of like the experience in the car?
Yeah, definitely. And then the Fat Comp as well. Because my connection to punk was that way at that time was because of Green Day really kind of being my gateway with Dookie. I will say it was Longview that did it for me. I was
nice.
Pre-Basket Case, so I have a little bit of credit.
Dude, it's a great bass line.
Yeah. So, but I had been introduced to like the Descendants before that, and I was into like alternative grunge, like in my early teens. So all these things were kind of were around there. So because of Fat. Really, and because that's who these guys were kind of like into that style of like accessible like punk that was from Fat or Epitaph and that kind of stuff. So and that was also cool to me because of them being misfits in that lineup. In a variety of ways, and
Definitely.
that played out, of course, for years after. So.
The North Korea of punk is the way they were referred to for a while, which is really great. It's like an island within the scene. Tons of fun. Yeah. So you get this new record, Let's Talk More Rock, and you have the animal friendly, pro-feminist, like everything on the front cover that's around the edges. And you get that record and you said that's the one that started kind of hitting you. And I'm just curious, like when I reached out to you, like you chose the song off Let's Talk More Rock for your episode appearance. And, I'm just curious about the role of this record in your life in general, like the whole package, the whole record. And, how it inspired you generally, if it changed the way you started seeing the world, things like that, some big picture changes.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I think it started with from the cover and then having those messages on there and the liner notes and just the themes that are reoccurring throughout the album. Where when I was born in Brooklyn, I lived there till I was 10 years old, and then my family moved to Goldsboro, North Carolina, in 1990, and that's like night and day. You're talking. I went from like walking to school in Brooklyn to taking a 40-minute bus ride into a tobacco field and going to class in a trailer, and it was very rural, very conservative, very bigoted. In so many ways, and me being from the North didn't help with the North versus South, and Yankee, and then finding out how I fit in there, trying to conform and do these things, and trying to make friends in that environment, how difficult that was, and then going to high school, and getting into reading more, AK Press, different things that were. Other people around me who were a little bit older, who were getting into this kind of stuff or more political ideas and playing off of that, feeding off of that. But this album really, it was just so focused and such what I needed to hear. Even with when it came to like atheism and, just going through a big battle with my family for not getting my Catholic confirmation, which was like the biggest deal to them that, you got to do this, you're going to do this. And I was like, no, I'm not. And it was just a giant battle. And, it sparked a lot of, there was a lot of rebellion there that may not have been focused. And, it's just like an angry kind of kid who's lashing out without any kind of framework or guidance or feeling like alone in that. So this, when this came out, it was like, well, you're not alone and you're not the only one feeling this way. And here's why. But also the best part was just like what I was exposed to in the liner notes, like, Howard Zinn and reading People's History of the United States, or, Ani DeFranco as an artist, or, Chomsky, especially, started reading Chomsky and all these things. And that just branched out into just a whole new world and a whole new just excitement and even musically too, branching off or finding other things that were similar in not only just musically but also philosophically. So it definitely changed my worldview in the sense that it provided that framework and just made me more confident in how I felt and that I wasn't crazy or that these things that I've seen going on, especially from the 80s, in New York was terrible as far as the economy, crime, various things there with potentially going bankrupt and all this other stuff. And then moving to the South, and that was like a mobility change for us because my dad was like loading trucks for yellow freight, and then was able to get in the family business and textiles, and get a better job, and we had a lot of different things afforded to us by doing that. But I got to see two different worlds, more diverse, struggle in the North, and then the South, where it was very narrow-minded and conservative in so many ways, and then just trying to make sense of all that, and this definitely helped do that, to see why inequality exists or why there are struggles between us and divisions and various things and how those play out. So
nice. Well, I love that you mentioned earlier that this band may have had a role as well in getting you into the field of sociology, which you did your master's in. So I'm wondering if you can tie in like that professional, intellectual drive with possibly what you were learning with this band.
Yeah, that's great, because I was originally thinking I was going to NC State for something with computers, computer science, or something in that realm, because that's just something I've always loved since I was very young, was working with technology and computers especially. My first semester there, I believe it was, I took a social problems class, which was a entry-level sociology class, and immediately, like, I was like, okay, I know what I'm going to school for. This is, and I didn't really get exposed to or know much about sociology as a discipline before I went there. It kind of was like, oh, this class is about social problems, and here's the description about race, class, gender, and applying it to current society. So I just took it for that reason, and it was great. It definitely provided the educational component to what I was already into and thinking about, and I was able to study that for 4 years and just immerse myself into that, and took everything I could related to these kinds of topics, whether it was political or history and those sorts of things. Because I don't know if I mentioned it, but I did minor in history and gender studies while I was there. So it was kind of like I was able to, my elective courses, I was intentionally like filling them with, African American history, and various topics that were all like interconnected. So.
Awesome. I mean, that's just great. And I'm sure that you were just reading constantly and just exposing yourself to everything you possibly could. That's kind of what I was trying to do as well whenever I was in my first few semesters at the University of Missouri. And I was just trying to become a thinker. Like, it was a very purposeful endeavor. Like, okay, I want to be a smart person now, and I want to think about things in the world that matter, and I want to care about stuff, but I don't know if I have the brain power to make it happen. So it's like sheer force of will of just forcing myself to get through these books that were just beyond me, that, it did not come easy to me. And it was quite a journey, I tell you what.
Yeah, it can be. And that was another benefit of that, was just what I was reading, or what I was, assigned to read, was what I wanted to. So it was easy in that sense to put in the effort, because I was, into it so much and just enjoyed consuming that knowledge, being challenged in a variety of ways,
Yeah.
and across disciplines, across topics, and things of that nature.
Nice. Well, when I reached out to you, I mean, obviously, I knew that you were going to pick State Lottery whenever we were talking about an episode to have you on as the guest. And, it was totally obvious to me. And I'm just delighted as well because we've been talking about doing this for so long, but we finally got to it. And so what is it about the State Lottery that stands out to you as a singular piece of work? Like, why is this song so important to you as a person who cares about things in the world?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions in it, and it was sort of like, stop and think about this for a second. Like, what's going on here with this capitalist plutocracy that is driven by greed and profit and corporate power, and recognizing this then, it's clear then, it's clear now, still completely relevant, but it really is focused on election winning and how our elections and timely that we what we're going through now with the current election and transition of power there, but that there's this prize to win. And how you do it is with money and influenced by that. And you're celebrating this when there's so many problems that need to be addressed that generally don't. As long as the status quo remains, as long as the economy remains the way it is, we only see that wealth disparity increase and continue to increase, which causes more social problems, pitting us against each other. The song is very class war focused, where there's a common enemy, but instead we choose to fight them, amongst ourselves and be scapegoats, like scapegoating folks for what the real problems are. Saying, blaming immigrants, blaming minorities, blaming women, whoever is the most convenient scapegoat for that particular bigot who's saying that, instead of saying, well, look, as long as the system remains in place, you think you're going to be better off because you're this way, but it's structural, it's institutionalized, and as long as we keep playing this game, every 4 years, and going back and forth and ping ponging back and forth, and not truly winning there, and corporations still hold that influence over our government and control the decisions and policies and laws, and at our expense. We're going to be, be bad off as a whole, as a collective whole.
Well, and I think that we should also recognize when we're recording this, because it is currently January 7th, 2021, and
Absolutely.
the attempted white supremacist fascist coup, which failed yesterday in Washington, D.C., is we very much know that happened. Like, we're recording this in a time, you and I, when that has already occurred, and we watched it with our own eyes yesterday. And so I just wanted to situate ourselves within time, because everything is so ridiculous with this transition process. And I'm like, why in the world are we waiting 3 months for this? And I'm just like, it's the slowest transition ever, and we're still in the middle of it. We still have weeks to go. But for the listeners, Michael and I know that the coup occurred yesterday, the attempted coup.
Yeah. I definitely spent most of my day following that closely, which actually, it makes this song, a little bit different because of something that we haven't seen as part of that transition of power. Because usually it's, here's the keys to the castle, do your thing.
Yeah.
And because of that, because the status quo has, regardless of which party the president is, overall things, stay pretty maintained.
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's not really a party. There's the confetti, the balloons has been, downplayed on this one when it comes to this election game, and it's amazing even still how somewhat close, like it wasn't a super razor thin result, but that the fact that we can live here and that actually could have been possible for a re-election of Trump is just it says a lot about really what's going on, and that's not going away. So the key to this is that the election is over. As long as there's no other coup and there's an actual if Trump's reading what he says and is going to do it, where he's now saying, we just heard like maybe an hour ago that now he's going to participate and play nice apparently. But regardless, the next, what happens next? Now you have, you say you got your president in there, you've got a Democratic majority. What are you going to do? Like, what's going to happen? What are we going to see? Are we going to see fundamental change, structural change, just by that happening? But there's a lot of people doing stuff on the ground, organizing outside of that, which they always have. We always have, between activism and volunteering and those things that needs to still continue without, sitting back and being complacent. And then, 4 years, the same thing happens again or worse. So,
yeah. Well, and to think about the fact that we have to do all of this again in 2024, which seems like, oh, that feels like a week away. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, we're going to be right back in this in just like a couple of weeks, it feels like. But, I was thinking a lot about yesterday and the folks rampaging the U.S. Capitol. And I was listening to your Night Sweats cover of the state lottery. And I was like watching some propaganda videos, and I was listening to your cover, and I was listening to Aaron Scott from Attica's cover. And every time that your band or Aaron or propaganda would sing, with every racist pointed finger, I can hear the goose steps getting closer, I was like creeped out, because you think about goose stepping and you think about like, totalitarian regimes like Nazi Germany, like North Korea, like Soviet Russia. And you see those orderly lines of goose stepping soldiers on massive wide boulevards with tanks and weaponry and things like that. But yesterday we saw the American version of goose stepping, in my view.
Yeah,
we saw these folks who just have this very singular ideology about what America is or is not, and who belongs and who does not. And instead of the orderly goose stepping, we saw what we saw. So to me, whenever I see that, with every racist pointed finger, I can hear the goose steps getting closer. I was like singing like, holy smokes, this is our version of that line. And we're seeing it today.
Yeah. And the thing is that, we've been calling it out for a long time. I mean, this just didn't come out of nowhere. And, being, these fascists being emboldened and enabled by, the president and others, in the regime that have been encouraging this. And then, they want to try to backtrack and, play nice last night and all that bullshit, which is, just a scam. We can see right through that. But yeah, it's perfect to point that out, because, isn't our obligation to confront this tyranny? Well, yeah, but that's not like, that's the other ththing, labeling those as anarchists. No, that's not anarchists. Those are fascists. Like, this is not about decentralization of power. Like, this is an insurgency, that was, happened at the Save America rally earlier, that it, just pumped them up to just, to do what they did and storm the Capitol. So, and that's the thing. It's like, what do they think they're going to achieve and accomplish by this, and what their ideology is? Totally against what the song is, obviously, as the last line state there. So, that's the thing. The election, we need to put the pedal to the metal when it comes to resisting and fighting fascism and those sorts of things. And and in Night Sweats, one of the songs with we have called Alt-Right Delete, and it's anti-fascist, fuck white supremacy, all about it. And it's talking about the when this administration took over, and who was goose stepping up the White House steps is one of the lines when it comes to like your Miller types and your Bannons and all these people that you're holding close to you and signaling out there to the public that it was clear then, and the thing is that I've known about Donald Trump since '89 when I lived in Brooklyn. I was 9 years old, and the Central Park 5 case and what happened there, that moment had a major impact and influence on me as a child, seeing how that played out in general, but specifically how Trump, stuck his nose into it and put out that full page ad, calling for these teenagers' heads who are innocent. Now we know that, but they put them on trial in the media, and it was clear who this guy was, and then that's why to even see this happen to me is just mind blowing in the first place. They rose to power and has been in office this whole time, and also just who's been filling those positions. And now what we saw happen yesterday, come to a boiling point. It's wild.
Yeah. So this song is full of fantastic lines and imagery. Do you have any specific lines that we haven't talked about yet that really leap out at you? That's something that you really love?
Yeah.
Besides the whole thing.
Yeah. That's the easy way out, isn't it? I really there's a lot about Chris's writing that I love, and it's also had an influence on how I write lyrics and things and do vocals for sure. But could have hit the nail much harder on the head. It's just it's just not blatantly obvious. Come on, it's right in front of you. Please see this at least, because if you understand that there's a lot to do and then there's nothing being done about it, and it's like winning a prize and winning the lottery, and it's come on, it's right there in front of you. That really jumps out to me. But the scrambling for the crumbs they spit out to, because of the way wealth is concentrated, and how the wealthy are idolized and apologized for as long as they're successful because they're gifted or they're talented or they're smart. They don't pay taxes. They don't all these things that are so that most people will never be. That's a very limited club, but for some reason, even the poorest person may think, I too one day can achieve that because of the American dream, which is just the American scheme.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, this has been the 41 years I've been alive in this system that it's built this way. It's structural. It's intentional. While we're fighting over those crumbs, there's so much more to get. It's there. It's another line from another propaganda song, but we want nothing more than what you already have. I don't believe that's used in that context, but I've always thought about that when I think about this is not something that we're just trying to steal. It's been stolen. It's there, and it's not. There's something wrong with it, and that's the reason why we're struggling, but then also they're pitting us against each other, and we're fighting ourselves rather than what we really should be fighting.
Yeah, that really reminds me of a Tim Wise essay that I read several years ago in the wake of some kind of storm or hurricane. There would be these two groups of folks living across from a river from each other, in Louisiana. One is a white community and one is a mostly black community. And these are both very poor communities in Louisiana. They have equally little, yet one is white and one is black. And instead of banding together and, doing something together and collaborating with all of the human power between the two communities, the white people dislike the black community and instead are sycophants to the white people that are wealthier on the other side of town, because they're oh, I could go to that white rich neighborhood someday. So instead of working with my black neighbor across the river here who has what I have, I am going to, throw my lot in with the folks up the hill. And because that could be me someday, you know what I mean? So instead of realizing that you have a built-in natural alliance with the folks that are right next to you, they have, as you said, split them apart. They're fighting amongst themselves while they're not banding together and facing the real enemy up the hill.
Right. Yeah. And then, with race and class, the intersectionality, of all those things going on, with the males running the show and that kind of thing. Like, yeah, you see how powerful that really is. And, it's a way to, it's socially constructed in a way that it ensures that takes place. And, that's part of the thing is resisting that and seeing through that, but not just seeing through it, but doing something about it. Like it's one thing to say something, but if you're not engaging in ways and making decisions or doing things in life that reflect that, it's easy to get sucked back into that without even really thinking about it, where you're playing into that or perpetuating something without critically, analyzing what you're doing and why you're doing it, or what you could be doing in a way that challenges that in some way.
What do you like about the musical performance of this song between John, Chris, and Jord?
I think with the sound clip intro, with the Chomsky selection, which is a fine choice. And actually, I thought about that a lot when we did the cover, because we actually changed the sound clip.
Yeah, I loved what you did.
Updated it with a Chris Hedges clip instead. It's something we talked about, whether we should just use the original, but since we're doing the cover and it's now, we figured we'd pick something a little bit more timely and still pay homage to the song in that way. But I think, the way it hits and it kicks in off the sound clip, it's just right off the bat, it's just like, boom, here we go. And it starts off with the question, which I really like, because I like the way this band has always challenged us and asked those questions and made you think. And so this thing right off the bat, does it seem strange to you? Like, okay, let me get your attention. I'm going to lay this out, and then we're going to go into it here. And then there's the odd change at the end with that stop, that little.
Is it the part where it goes, wow?
Yeah, there's just something really rad about that. Because during that time, what I was listening to, pop punk, the stops were everywhere.
Yeah. Newfound Glory.
Yeah, it was it's a challenge. Like, who's going to do the best stop in the right spot or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just slightly off, and it's just something Jord does. It's just it's just cool. And as a drummer, that's always stood out. It's just really cool the way they're hitting and connecting. And they're kind of the only way they could do that is if they were just in sync. The way it's just the timing, and it's so tight and so short. It's just really cool. But even the break part where it was it really kind of hits home the lyrics about first they taught us to depend on the nation state's demand, how it just kind of rings out and you hear everything then. And it's really, just making a point about privatization, where promised you this, and then what we've done is contracted this all out, and now you have to buy it. And if you can afford it, then cool, you get your tourniquet, and if not, figure it out. Good luck to you, and scramble for it. And it's the rat race has begun, and you figure it out. And that's where it takes off too. Again, it comes back in. So it's just really cool dynamics, and it's a really kind of straightforward song, but there's enough changes in there and different things going on that keeps it interesting. And it's really short. I didn't really realize it till we did it, the cover, how the sound clip is so long, and then the song, the music itself is kind of short. So I hope if somebody randomly checks out our track we see on Bandcamp where it might not get past that because it starts with a SoundCloud. Somebody might just write it off like, what is this? This is too long.
Anybody who's listened to this far in this interview on this podcast has already heard the cover because I put the cover on the episode before we talked. So everybody who's heard it knows that it is a banger, and it's got a lot of hardcore elements to it that you guys switched up a little bit. And I'm curious about the adaptation process the band went through while making it and what kind of decisions you made, because you did toy with the tempos. You added some harder breakdowns. Tell me a little bit about that adaptation and how you all went through that.
Yeah. When I kind of brought this up. I always wanted to cover the song. I always wanted to do it. Like, it was obviously with, my moniker, a screen name that's been mine since probably like the instant messenger AOL days.
Really? Awesome. You've had it that long?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was my AIM name back then. So it's been a long time for sure, but it's always stood out to me. It's always been one of my favorites. But this is like, my favorite album of Propaganda. So I've always, had that name there. But so I brought it up like early on, like, we're going to think about doing cover songs. Let's do this. And everybody else was on board. Everybody else is totally into the band and the song. So there really wasn't much discussion about it. We kind of just learned, learn it, come back, and we'll practice it. And it was just kind of natural. It just kind of happened just because of the style and, how we play together anyway. So we just turned it into that. And Rodney, for sure, on guitar, is a big Propaganda fan, and he's got his own style to me. I love the way he plays. And our drummer too, and our bass player. Everybody's just great musicians they've been playing forever. We've all known each other for a really long time and kind of sync up that way. So we just did it, and it just came out that way. I think, maybe at the end when it was like, it kind of slows down and breaks down a little bit more, that was intentional, just to kind of give it a little bit of an outro feel and then put a little of the style on it that we're doing. We just wanted to go at it and have it be organic. Where the Attica cover is awesome and it's completely different and reimagined, which is awesome. I love that. And it's nice to have the contrast of the two, because we really, kept it pretty true and just did it in our style, basically. So the thought process and the kind of arrangement and all that wasn't really very professional or anything like that. We just did it, honestly.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, tell me a little bit about what Propaganda means to you now at this point in your life, after having been a fan of theirs for all these years, like all the way through the catalog. What does this band mean to you?
Yeah, I always joke, like, when a new album comes out, it's like a book of my Bible or something like that, where it's just kind of like I'm so excited when I know a new album's coming out. And it's just another chapter. But again, like every time I put it on an album, if I go back and for the first time or listen to it for the 1000th time, it's always relevant. It always hits me the same way. It makes me feel all kinds of emotions, from rage to hope to anger to optimism to again, that feeling of not being alone. But just a way to keep me in check too. There's a lot of things that I need to hear over again. I need to understand my privilege or my place or who I am in the context of society or culture as a whole, not just as an individual. But there's always a challenge or a call to action. There's that as well. So it's not just like. And there's a lot of, self-reflection and self-criticism. So it helps that it doesn't come across as preachy or there's something wrong. You're doing this wrong. Like, as long as you're, trying to do the right thing and learning from that. And, as I've gotten older, they've gotten older, and you see that in the music and the lyrics as well. And becoming a little bit more relatable in some things that when we were young were a lot different in our lives now, and responsibilities or things that we care about now that we didn't care about so much, even ourselves in the past. So it really is kind of just like something that, when they stop playing, it's going to be a void, and I hope it doesn't happen. I know that bands can't live forever, but they've done a pretty good job of living a long time right now. And I think if the Rolling Stones can do it, they can do it.
Nice. Well, Michael, where can people find you? Where can people find Night Sweats? Tell us some links.
So the best thing to do, honestly, we just like to promote Bandcamp. It's just nightsweatsnc.bandcamp.com. Definitely, as far as a platform goes, prefer them. And we're on Facebook, even though I just recently got banned from there, so I can't do anything with the page anymore. So maybe Rodney will do something, but it's just been sitting there. But Instagram as well. It's all Night Sweats. And see, all my contact is the state lottery, whether it's on all the typical social media platforms. So.
Were you ripping on your state senator or something? Because I think I'm on thin ice for my hijinks with Josh Hawley lately.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I see why. I can see that's an easy target there. Mostly mine's been local news posts and going in the comments too hard and fighting bigots on there and watching them just do whatever they want. And then for some reason, Facebook doesn't like when you call them out. And yeah, for the most interesting trivial things, but once it started happening, like any kind of violation, it just took off, and then they hit you with, so yeah, whatever. But honestly, I was like, contemplating with the whole, deactivate crew, but I honestly got so much joy out of doing that my goal became just to get banned, because that's the only way they were going to keep me away from calling these half-head bigots out. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, Michael, I'm so glad that we got to do this. I'm so glad we got to hang out and chat the state lottery. Let's Talk More Rock, Night Sweats, the fantastic cover and rendition that you all did. It's awesome. And thank you so much for coming on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. I had a blast.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much. And thank you, you two, for doing this and putting all the time and effort into it. It's as a diehard fan, this is amazing that you all took up this challenge and do this for us. Honestly, it's a great thing, and it's great to be here, and hopefully we'll keep in touch.
That means a ton.
The confetti, the balloons, the mile-wide grins, the victory dance to welcome in the air into a state of disrepair, because it sure seems strange to me. They're acting like they've won the lottery. Shouldn't they feel terror at the task that lies ahead? To house and clothe the millions, the system's left for dead. Could I have hit the nail much harder?
All right, so that was my chat with Michael Sileno and Night Sweats. And so, Keith, did you notice that I put a little surprise here in our return? That is a clip of our Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes guest, Frank Turner, covering the state lottery solo way back in 2004. So Frank and I talked about that on the Today's Empires episode. I think it was episode 9. Dude, I don't even remember. 11, something like that. So I went back and I snuck a little clip from Frank's cover of the state lottery from way back in 2004 into the episode. So I just love this. There are so many covers of this song, and so many are so good. So I just wanted to throw all these in here as little Easter eggs throughout.
It's like an oral history punk zine podcast meets variety show tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get to our part of the episode, shall we? We've been jacking around here for like 2.5 hours now. So let's start with the music. So, don't get me wrong. I love this song, and I love the songs on this record. but I find myself with not a whole heck of a lot to say about the music on this song, kind of similarly to how I felt when we discussed Middle Finger Response.
Mm-hmm.
So on some of the records, I go on and on about the music of this band. I dissect the time signatures. I do an instrument by instrument breakdown of the songs, but this one just goes fast and then it's over. So the music is a minute 50. There's like a 20-second Chomsky only introduction. So before the music kicks in under Chomsky for like another 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a whole heck of a lot to say about the music in general, but we'll talk a little bit about it. So what do you got for me here?
No, I think that's a fair assessment, Greg. I like the overall straightforward, somber tone of this, which I don't know if is very common on the first two records. I think it's interesting that what I feel as the best crafted songs in terms of mood and tone on Less Talk are the last two tracks. I think the State Lottery and Refusing to Be a Man, because they stand out so much and they really convey the meaning and the emotion behind the lyrics. I think it's straightforward. It's not incredibly complex. It doesn't need to be, and I'm okay with that. If every song on Less Talk sounded like this, I would probably have not come back and changed my thoughts and my mind about it. But I think as a little bit of an outlier, that it's okay to have a little bit of a breather in a way. Our pal Clem has a great playthrough, and it makes me think I could work my way around this on guitar, but he makes everything look easy. So who knows? Probably not. But yeah, it's not flashy. It has some straightforward power chords. It's got that little kind of slide part where it's like the dun 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 one, and then it kind of goes back. I'm the worst at singing riffs. Wow. It doesn't. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and you therefore are the best at singing riffs. The bass pops and snaps. It has that 90s punk accent with the drums where they're kind of that also is syncopated with the guitars at times where there are these accents that you don't really expect. I literally have dun 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 was written down, but and then in the moment I can't think of how to actually verbalize and vocalize that.
I love it.
But yeah, it's not the flashiest song. It's not the most complex song, but the somber tone fits the lyrics so well that I am forgiving that the music is maybe not what the band normally does.
Yeah. So, the riff is not super interesting to me on the guitar. I get so obsessed with where the band goes later with their music. Do you know what I mean? I know too much about the future of the band's writing to be impressed a whole heck of a lot by this tune. It's obviously a great song, but think about the riff to Mataka, Marisakun, Rasakan, or Night Letters, or Devil's Creek, basically what this band goes on to become. And this song, as we have, and I just, honestly, this might be one of the least interesting guitar songs to me that we've talked about so far. I like that little wow at 134. It's really cool. And the outro riff is just power chords at the A string fret of 1 and 3, and then 3 and 5, and then 5 and 7. It's just go dun 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 dun. So if you're a guitar player who wants a relatively understandable propaganda guitar project, go learn to play this song. I guarantee you that if you have a pretty decent, command of being able to play power chords, you can do this one. And Clem's playthrough video has got it so perfectly zoomed in on the guitar that you can, I was learning how to play it earlier, watching Clem. So I did exactly the same thing that you were doing, and I was actually learning how to play it a little bit. So, cool. It's definitely doable. However, My favorite thing about this song is the dual approach vocals on the tune. They are fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, from "Is This What We Deserve?" It's both of them singing. It's John and Chris. I think it's John. It might be George, but it sounds like John, I think. But they sing like the entire ending of the song together all the way to the end. So it comes in with "Is This What We Deserve?" and then it's dual vocals all the way to the end. And that is my favorite thing about this song, is these two guys singing together for like the entire ending of the song. I think that part is really fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. It stands out a lot.
Yeah. So do you have anything else to say about the music?
No, I mean, it is it's a straightforward track. It doesn't have a whole lot going on, kind of meat and potatoes, if you will.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to dive into the lyrics if you are.
Fabulous. Let's get into these lyrics. The song starts off with a spoken quote by Noam Chomsky.
The real prospects for authentic democracy depend on something else. They depend on how the people in the rich and the privileged societies learn some other lessons. For example, the lessons that are being taught right now by Mayans in Chiapas, Mexico. They're among the most impoverished and oppressed sectors in the continent, but unlike us, they retain a vibrant tradition of liberty and democracy, a tradition that we've allowed to slip out of our hands or simply be stolen from us. And unless people in the rich here and other rich and privileged societies, unless they can recapture and revitalize that tradition, the prospects for democracy are indeed dim.
I was able to dig up a little bit of information on that. So the quote which Chomsky speaks on the recording appears in print in the book Chomsky on Democracy and Education on page 259. So if you are listening out there and you actually want a printed version of this exact Chomsky quote that the band uses in the introduction to the song, you can find that in Chomsky on Democracy and Education. Go to page 259. It's right there. I found it. I did it. It's there. So I poked around a little bit in the introduction to the book as well. And I found out that Chomsky's parents were both teachers, which I thought was pretty cool. And I found that his father was a professor and a Hebrew grammarian. So I was enjoying learning a little bit about the life of Noam Chomsky, you know?
Yeah, and it took me a while to really explore what Chomsky is addressing and talking about, even with a very superficial reference or understanding to groups like the Zapatistas, being familiar with like Rage Against the Machine in the 90s, you know, like knowing words, but not really understanding what those things really mean.
Mm-hmm.
So Chomsky is discussing the eroding nature of democratic principles in wealthy nations, while the Zapatista Army, an indigenous arm organization, declared war on the Mexican government, demanding work, land, housing, food, health, education, independence, liberty, democracy, justice, and peace. The declaration was announced on New Year's Day in 1994 when NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, went into effect, addressing the neoliberal reforms and hundreds of years of struggle against settler colonialism and imperialism, and in response coordinated a 12-day uprising. So some information that gives some context about the people that Chomsky is referencing. According to the UN Human Rights Commission, 15% of the total Mexican population identifies as indigenous, and with the majority living in the southern states. Mexico's indigenous population accounts for just shy of 13 million people who speak 62 languages.
Wow.
Chiapas has the most multicultural and multi-ethnic population of the entire country. So out of any other territory or state, Chiapas has 1.1 million indigenous people, representing 27% of the state's total population.
Wow.
Chiapas is one of the wealthiest states in Mexico in terms of natural resources. For example, it has 30% of Mexico's fresh water, but it ranks as the second most marginalized state in the country. Half of Chiapas's indigenous population reports no income at all, and another 42% makes less than $5 a day. 70% of the Chiapas indigenous population suffer from high levels of nutrition. And throughout Mexican history, Chiapas indigenous people have been excluded from governmental decision-making processes, as well as from enjoying basic human rights as healthcare and education. So the oppression and inequality was worsened by NAFTA, which the Zapatista Army of Liberation considered a government betrayal by opening up opportunities for U.S. and Canadian agribusiness to buy and rent their land. So indigenous agricultural workers in Chiapas feared that international competition would wipe them out of the local markets, as 67% of Mexico's indigenous population worked in some form in agriculture. And the historical marginalization and abuse of indigenous people in Chiapas, together along with NAFTA, were the two factors that sparked the Zapatista uprising, as proclaimed in the Declaration of War. And I want to read actually part of it here.
Yes.
It says here that we are the product of 500 years of struggle, first against slavery, then during the War of Independence against Spain, led by insurgents, then to avoid being absorbed by North American imperialism, then to promulgate our Constitution and expel the French Empire from our soil. And later, the dictatorship of Diaz denied us the just application of the reform laws, and the people who rebelled and the people rebelled, and leaders like Villa and Zapata emerged poor people just like us. We have been denied the most elemental preparation so that they can use us as cannon fodder and pillage the wealth of our country. They don't care that we have nothing, absolutely nothing, not even a roof over our heads, no land, no work, no health, no healthcare, no food, no education, nor are we able to freely and democratically elect our political representatives, nor is there independence from foreigners, nor is there peace nor justice for ourselves and our children. But today we say enough is enough. We are the inheritors of the true builders of our nation, the dispossessed. We are millions, and we therefore call upon our brothers and sisters to join the struggle as the only path.
So powerful.
Right. And Chomsky wrote at the time, I'm going to quote two things here from him.
Sure.
He said, "It did not take long for such fears to be realized. Shortly after the NAFTA vote in Congress, workers were fired from Honeywell and GE plants for attempting to organize independent unions. The Ford Motor Company had fired its entire workforce in 1987, eliminating the UN contract and rehiring workers at far lower salaries. Forceful repression suppressed protests. Volkswagen followed suit in 1992, firing its 14,000 workers and rehiring only those who renounced independent union leaders with government backing. And these are central components of the economic miracle that is to be locked in by NAFTA." He also went on to say, a few days after the NAFTA vote, the U.S. Senate passed the finest anti-crime package in history, which is according to Senator Orrin Hatch, calling for 100,000 new police, high security regional prisons, boot camps for young offenders, extension of the death penalty and harsher sentencing, and other onerous conditions. Law enforcement experts interviewed by the press doubted that the legislation would have much effect on crime because it did not deal with the causes of social disintegration that would produce violent criminals. Primary among these are the social and economic policies polarizing American society, carried another step forward by NAFTA. The concepts of efficiency and health of the economy preferred by wealth and privilege offer nothing to the growing sectors of the population that are useless for profit making, driven to poverty and despair. If they cannot be confined to urban slums, they will have to be controlled in some other way.
Man.
So as a result of the Zapatista insurgency in Chiapas, the indigenous peoples in Mexico were granted the constitutional right of self-determination, and the this incorporation of this right into the Mexican Constitution is essential for the development of Mexican indigenous communities, as well as the Mexican democracy as a whole, which I think are the lessons that are being, taught by Mayans, as Chomsky refers to, the ability to organize and respond to political and economic oppression.
Well, Keith, I am just feeling tremendous gratitude to you for the amount of effort that you looked into on that information, because so much of that is stuff that I did not know. So you are literally teaching me so many things in real time right now. And I just want to say thank you, because
Well,
that
you're
was
welcome.
absolutely amazing. I'm just so lucky to do this show with you. I'm just gonna say that. So should we talk about the lyrics a little bit here? Now that you have blown my mind on Chomsky, I feel like we should just sign off and just end this right now and just move on with our lives.
Yeah, there's a lot more to say about this song. So I will start with the first lyrics here,
Sure.
Greg. It says, "Does it seem strange to you, the confetti, the balloons, the mild wide grins, and the victory dance to welcome in the heir to a state of utter and complete disrepair? Because it sure seems strange to me. They're acting like they won the fucking lottery."
I went through a ton of presidential administrations, and I searched confetti and inauguration as my key terms. And I found virtually identical photos for many inaugurations. And as you mentioned earlier, I put some of those on Twitter. And I also put one up of Trudeau and his mile-wide grin today after winning a $600 million election that didn't even need to be called. But there was one that really stood out to me, and that was the inauguration photos of Donald Trump. He is not smiling in his inauguration photos, and it was so telling, because it seems like no man ever wanted a job less than Trump wanted to be president. All he wanted was to win something.
Right.
And he didn't want what would come from actually winning. And I was looking at those photos of him frowning basically at his own victory party, and I was so happy that he was so unhappy. I was just delighted by his unhappiness. And because it seems like he really hated the job. And in inauguration after inauguration, though, besides that one, the image is the same. A winner and their family on a stage, confetti everywhere, huge smiles. This is not a vague line. This is actual real. And you can look it up over and over and over, and you'll see it for decades,
It's uncanny, the similarities between the pictures that you shared earlier.
It's curated, it's cultivated. You're put on stage in a specific suit or a specific dress. You're marched out there on a specific kind of stage in front of a specific kind of audience, and you basically are just on display. You know what I mean? Go out there and wear that big smile, and it all just feels so fake to me. And if it's not fake, it's because it's people that want to win things, and that's what they're in it for. It feels like, is winning, and not about really helping people. I don't know, because that celebrating a victory of something in a US election costs $1 billion, and so it just seems just horrible to me, and I don't really enjoy looking at these photos. But it also reminds me of the lyric elsewhere from Propaganda, "This system cannot be reformed." So that's what the state of disrepair line reminds me of. "This system cannot be reformed" too. So that's what I was thinking of.
Well, if this is going to be one of a song that I've really overlooked, this first line is probably one of my most overlooked Propaganda lyrics. Then one that is just plainly obvious, but the imagery that is depicted has become perennial displays. It's almost like it's picked out of the Olympics. It's not something from politics.
Yeah.
It's it's a national spectacle, so it is politics, but parades, mass gatherings, speeches, as if the doom and dismay looming around the corner and just under the surface is going to be kept at bay by magically the newest elected official.
Mm-hmm.
And the tone here of the song, the music and the lyrics are so antithetical to the celebratory nature of yes, we can, or build back better, or a safer world and a more hopeful America, or what I forgot or didn't remember, John Kerry's slogan, let America be America again.
Oh my God.
So all of the pageantry that comes along with, the sloganeering and promises, and the heir to a state of disrepair is a sharp line, not just the artistic quality of the lyrics, but also I think the implication by saying the heir. The band is addressing the assumed entitlement to the position,
Mm-hmm.
not simply as a successor, but as one who is destined through heredity, familial wealth, or statute to take on the title of president, of prime minister, of members of Congress or parliament. It's this assumed experience or this entitled experience that people are guaranteed or promised.
Yeah, and that reminds me of sort of like the behind the scenes hijacking of like the candidacy of somebody like Bernie Sanders for president, where so many things were happening behind the scenes to where it was like assumed to be a different candidate's turn. You know what I mean? So Sanders was widely viewed by a lot of people as very competitive, but it wasn't his turn. He didn't like play nice with the right people over the course of his career. And we all know how that worked out. He basically had 2 campaigns for president that were, grassroots successes essentially. And, just kind of things happen behind the scenes that I think are still being unpacked and just didn't work out for him. So that's what it feels like to me, is like you're bringing your candidate to the finish line instead of it actually being somebody that people are actually excited about,
Yeah.
So we've got this next line. I mean, shouldn't they feel terror at the task that lies ahead to feed and house the people that this system's left for dead? And could I have hit the nail much harder on the head? It's profits before lies. They are motivated by greed. So I see a lot of issues being discussed in this line, right? There are several issues. So there's feeding, housing, healthcare, profiting in industries where the profit margins get better when you deny people certain services that would make them healthier, right? So this is too much to dive into, frankly. All of these are intense issues in and of themselves, and they are and have been discussed elsewhere by people that are far more intelligent and informed than you and I. And we've talked about all of these issues on this very podcast at various points over the last year and a half. And I'd just like to preface all of this with that statement that, like, I don't really know much about these things, but I know a couple of things. Like, I was looking up some homelessness and houselessness statistics. And so apparently 17 out of every 100,000 people in the U.S. are 17 out of every 1,000 people in the U.S. are homeless. And as of January of 2020, there were 580,466 people experiencing homelessness in the USA. And in 2017, there were 553,000 people experiencing homelessness. So from 2017 to 2020, that number jumped from 553,000 to 580,000. So rising. And about 235,000 people experience homelessness in Canada in any given year. And the statistics allege that there are only 25 to 35,000 homeless people in Canada on any given night. So that feels low, but I'm not very informed on this in other countries, or frankly, my country. So I'm just saying this is what I found. But
right.
According to the last shelter report in 2019, at least 320,000 people are homeless and almost 5,000 people are rough sleeping, which is likely a huge underestimate. And 726 people died homeless in England and Wales in 2018, which was a 22% rise from the year 2017. So the UK has a massive problem. And there are about 116,000 homeless people in Australia. So this is just some statistics. So, we're talking about housing the people that the system is left for dead in this line. And we can see that there are hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people in the world that, are housing insecure. And so in the US, what did they try to do to deal with that? Public housing. And so there are 970,000 public housing units in the United States. And if we think about the largest public housing authority in the country, we have New York City. And the average income for people living in these units is about $23,000 a year. There are 181,000 units in New York City. There are 400,000 people living in New York City public housing, and there are 174,000 families. So it's 45% African American, 45% Hispanic, and 4% white in New York City's public housing. So there are a further 200,000 quote unquote ghosts living in these units who are unofficial residents as well. So there are 400,000 documented people in New York City living in public housing, and an additional 200,000 that are unofficially residents of those as well. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of New York City residents here. And, the crime victimization in those public housing units is 63 per 100,000 compared to 12 per 100,000 elsewhere in the city. So we're talking about an exponentially higher risk of being the victim of some type of crime as well. And dude, I don't know about you, but I've been looking at housing a lot.
I have not. It's too depressing.
Yeah. So housing in the United States is in a really interesting position right now. It's outrageous. It's getting more outrageous by the day, it feels like. I have friends that are trying to buy homes right now, and they keep getting bid out by cash offers. And some of these friends that I know are going in with their first offer for a house on the market at $25,000 above the asking price for the house. So say a house goes on the market for $200,000, they are going in at a minimum opening bid of $225,000. Okay. And they're not getting the bids. They're being beaten out by people with cash offers. So the median home price in the United States is now over $360,000 in June of 2021.
Jeez.
That is a 23% year over year increase.
Jeez.
Yeah. And the main cause for the current housing demand is the low mortgage rates. So at the start of the pandemic in March 2020, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate was sat at 3.45%. And by July of this year, that number had dropped to 2.87%. So we have extremely low mortgage rates and a large amount of people looking for homes. And the supply does not meet the demand. Prices skyrocket. People are paying $50,000, $60,000, $90,000 over asking. A house in my neighborhood last summer went for $90,000 over asking, just 2 doors down from where I live. So, supply is an issue. And according to the National Association of Realtors, like the U.S. has underbuilt its housing needs by at least 5.5 million units over the last 20 years, which blew my mind. I had no idea. And that's a stark comparison to the previous housing bubble in 2008 when overbuilding was a massive problem.
Right.
So we slingshot in both directions and we get it wrong both times. So, according to polling as well about reasons why people aren't owning a home, about 40% of respondents say they just can't put away enough per month for the down payment. And this is something that I am personally concerned about as well, paying my existing bills while putting away enough money to purchase a home is just like, this is an overwhelming thought. So obviously everyone can make different financial decisions at various points in time. Like today I cooked instead of ordering like Grubhub or whatever, but it's not an option to not buy stuff when you need it. Like it's so hard to put away money right now. And if you just happen to be born and raised in an expensive place to live, like say you're a person who was born and raised in Seattle, Washington,
right?
You went to high school in Seattle, you grew up in your parents' house in Seattle. Now you have a whole life there. You don't want to move away, and you are just completely priced out of the insanity of the Seattle housing market. So like this is something that I think about as well. Like if you just happen to be born and raised in an expensive place to live and you don't want to leave, but you have a modest profession like teaching, which pays not amazingly well, but you like your work, you won't just get across that finish line of saving because you're just maintaining and paying your bills without putting any back. So, I mean, even today, I was reading an article on the Toronto Star about how the city spent $2 million to evict people from parks when we could have used all that money to house people, you know? So this is a real problem. So this song brings up so many issues. And I was looking at another report from Harvard and Habitat for Humanity called The State of the Nation's Housing. And it showed a lot of fascinating aspects of unaffordability. So the pandemic came as the U.S. was facing a crisis level housing affordability issue. In 2019, 37 million households were housing cost burdened, and that means they were spending 30% or more of their incomes on housing, which represented 30% of all households nationwide. So 1 in 7 households, 17 million, were severely cost burdened, spending half or more of their income on housing. Jeez. So, you know, you and I are both renters at the moment. And so these are things that you and I think about. And speaking of renters, they are even more cost burdened than homeowners. So 46% of renters are cost burdened compared to 21% of homeowners, and 24% of renters and 9% of homeowners were severely cost burdened. So in total, though, homeowners make up about 40% of all households with severe housing cost burden, given the larger number of homeowners in the overall population. But cost burden was the greatest among low income households. So for households earning less than 30,000, 81% of renters and 64% of homeowners were cost burdened. So this includes like 57% of renters and 43% of homeowners with severe cost burdens. But, you know, those earning between 30 and 45,000, 57% of renters and 36% of homeowners are cost burdened. So this is a massive crisis of unaffordability in our country. And it's, you know, driven by high housing costs relative to income. And so like, I think about how much money I make at my multiple jobs, and I went into an industry or a profession that I believed in strongly, and it didn't really work out too well for me financially. And I basically make what my dad made in 1989.
Yeah.
So this is a big problem for me. But we also have the issue of healthcare in this song. And it's getting worse in the US. The number of uninsured, non-elderly Americans fell from 48 million in 2010 to 28 million in 2016. And then it rose back to 30 million in the first half of 2020. So our uninsured rates are going back up. So, you know, compared with other Americans, the uninsured are disproportionately likely to be Black or Latino, be young adults, have low incomes, or live in states that don't expand Medicaid. But what we see here in these songs, in this song in particular, is a variety of issues that face these people with their mile-wide grins in this song. And they're coming into this system, and we know they're not going to fix it. Like, you know what I mean? Like every time we have a new inauguration, I'm like, this person's not going to fix this stuff. And like, I look up all these statistics that I'm just rattling off here, and I'm just like completely blown away by what I'm finding. So anyway, that's what I was thinking about with this particular line. And it just sent me down a rabbit hole of statistics to illustrate just how clearly screwed we are.
Yeah, Greg, that stands out. I mean, with all of those things that you shared, the line, shouldn't they feel terror at the task that lies ahead? Just I guess an analogy. My students ask me all the time if I ever plan to be a principal, and my answer is basically, oh dear God, no. Dealing with parents or students in a disciplinary way only, the lack of funding, staffing, right? We can't find substitutes right now. Athletics, staff conflicts, or student conflicts. the fact that we're in a pandemic, safety, disaster, intruder, and active shooter training, all of that, like the amount of responsibility and pressure would be so overwhelming to me. Making decisions that would help or most likely hurt the well-being of young people, none of that would be worth to me a six-figure salary. So on a larger scale, with all of the social and economic issues that you mentioned, that those things have only worsened since 1996. How anyone would think, yeah, I want that responsibility, and I am in a unique position to be able to fix that. And I know I've dropped this quote from Douglas Adams before, but I really think it bears repeating, from A Hitchhiker's Guide, in which he says, "It is a well-known fact that those people who must want to rule people are ipso facto those least suited to do it. And anyone who is capable of getting themselves made president should on no account be allowed to do the job." So it's just perfect.
Oh man.
So for any rational, compassionate person, holding elective office would feel like a Sisyphusian task, right?
Yeah.
Some torment in Hades of rolling the ball up a hill and never achieving the end task, as legislative and corporate and cultural powers would never allow those things to be completely solved. And even if they would, the next person in line would probably just roll back the progress. And every 2 or 4 years now, we're on this repeating messaging cycle that the current election is the most dire in US history. And though I would have voted for a jelly donut over Donald Trump. Okay. His defeat eased some of the tension in my shoulders and the clenching of my jaw from the previous 4 years. But his defeat doesn't mean human achievement or survival. Really, getting him out of office was necessary. But I mean, just this week I saw that the Biden administration has continued to boost fossil fuel projects and is now preparing to expand offshore drilling, declaring that the warnings in the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that report does not represent sufficient cause to reevaluate the drilling plan of 78 million square acres off the Gulf Coast.
Dear God.
So, I'm glad Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump, but that doesn't do anything about the Hellfire missile that killed 10 people in Kabul, in the same family, just the last month. So I'm glad that he defeated him, but I'm not glad that he is in office.
Yeah, I agree. And things are not, as far as I can tell, things are not going well with this presidency. It does not feel like a massive success story, at least not to me. So I agree. I share those sentiments with you, and I'm just blown away that they want this responsibility.
Right.
It's too big to even consider. When you talk about hundreds of millions of people's lives and being in charge of that, and then doing things like this, like drilling offshore, expanding these, when we just saw these insane hurricanes just devastate Haiti and Louisiana and then New York City. I mean, what in the world? So it's overwhelming, And then we have this next line. First, they taught us to depend on their nation states to mend our tired minds, our broken bones, our bleeding limbs. And I love the lyrical connection to the earlier nation states tune.
Right. Yeah.
And the inside joke here of how we thought nation states were a good idea. And then how we talk about the intergenerational replication of the worldview. Like, this also reminds me of Bringer of Greater Things, and we seem to be taught like the narratives of how we get the greatest gift. And in this case, it wasn't the savior who will never rise, but instead was a system of governance and organization that was solid, strong, cared about people's livelihoods, cared about all social classes, etc. But we know that it doesn't. We're living the government cartoon. Like, we drag our twisted carcasses out of bed and we tell ourselves, well, this is what we got to do. Got to get to Friday. And at this point, it is what we got to do. But is there a better way? Is there a different vision that we can manifest for ourselves in the future? And I've talked at length about this podcast for a long time about the visions for the future that I wish would happen. And it's hard knowing that my vision for the future isn't really likely. Like, this is like my get off my lawn moment. You know what I mean? For like where I feel like an old man being like, oh my God, if we're rolling back voting rights at this stage of my life at going on 38, things are only going to get more confrontational, aren't they? So if voting rights, basically the simplest thing that we can do, if that is getting worse when I am going on like closing in on 40, this is not a good sign for the second half of my life. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm really worried about here, is that things look so bleak with regards to the current status of our nation state that I just, it blows my mind to think about my kid being around for years and years after I'm gone. And that's scary.
Yeah. And with the false promises and assurances, even like if it's in the past or now as we approach 40, tied to national identities. And not just the facade of the American dream, but also there's like this bait and switch of consolidated federal power coinciding with benign neglect and abandonment of any economic responsibility toward the people, thanks to rhetoric like government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. Or the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are I'm from the government and I'm here to help, while they continue to pass policies that benefit themselves financially, and they become imperial presidents, but refuse to help the people that they serve. So we are told that we have like a governmental system that is uniquely exceptional and divine when we're young, and sold the framework that it is corrupt when we're older. So we don't actually demand anything from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've got this next line, which reminds me far too much of the beginning of the pandemic. It's creeping me out. But now they've sold off all the splints and contracted out the tourniquets. And if we jump through hoops, then we might just survive. So here's what it has me thinking of. It reminds me so much of the interstate fighting to compete for PPE during the spring and summer of 2020 in the US, where states were bidding against each other for PPE and ventilators. And it was really surreal to watch that occurring last year. Like, I just remember hearing about states bidding against each other in some kind of online marketplace, bidding against FEMA, realizing that their PPE supplies might be seized on the tarmac. Like, I remember reading it, like Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland was like going through all these insane work to make sure that his PPE wasn't seized, and how it was just a national disaster from start to finish. And we're, barreling down on 700,000 people who have died COVID positive. So, I mean, it's pretty wild, but I also think of how so many people out there, myself included at a few various points, have done gig economy work that on the surface looks like it might pay well, but it contains zero benefits of any kind. And then thinking of how insanely hard it would be to pay for things like health insurance, investments, retirement planning, in the kinds of careers that are super easy to get a hold of right now. But we're just jumping through hoops in this gig economy in our insanely fast changing world. But are we surviving? I don't know, man.
Yeah. And what comes to, I didn't even think about COVID somehow. This is like the one time I've not made a connection to it. But, there's a story from earlier this year about that startup, that vaccination startup in Philadelphia led by a 22-year-old applying for contracts with zero health experience, or the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars have been given out to contractors accused of prior fraud, making things like ventilators and other necessary medical equipment or PPE that they have no experience doing so.
Oh, it's comedy.
Oh
Tragic
my gosh.
comedy.
So, I mean, Greg, you describing like the measurable costs of living in the United States and how that has gotten more expensive or, and less attainable. Yet it's like there's still an article that goes viral every month or so that decries millennials for not being fiscally responsible because, you buy a coffee every other day, or you get avocados at the grocery store.
They're delicious.
As if that is the reason why that we can't get ahead or have the same of what our parents or older generations did, or somehow like selling this narrative that we should pity people making $500,000 and how hard it is to get by on that amount of money, or, becoming successful. It's easy. All you have to do is just have your parents throw some money in a trust while you live at home and work for a family's investment firm. But this quote, I actually came across someone's description of this quote online, and I want to just read it because it goes along with what you said, and I think they so succinctly nailed what the point the band is making here. So it says here, social services are often farmed out to private companies that make it more difficult to access said services. The less the private industry provides to citizens, the more money they can keep for themselves. The lines are especially poignant when one considers the American healthcare system.
Yeah. So then we have this next line. Is this what we deserve? To scrub the palace floors, to fight amongst ourselves as we scramble for the crumbs they spit out, frothing at the mouth about the scapegoats that they've chosen for us. Something that blows me away right now, like I said earlier, is the housing crisis going on right now. Where housing in the U.S. is skyrocketing. Houses are going in bidding wars. They're selling for tens of thousands over asking and cash offers. And I just see people setting themselves up to be living in houses that they massively overpaid for, which they'll then be underwater on, which they then default on. And that ideal of asset accumulation in the U.S. through property ownership slips through the fingers of an entire generation of people and quote unquote sets them back in their lives. And I just think about how for some people, for a very few amount of people, like, the money just comes in and the bills get paid and it's never even a worry because they're super rich. So I just think about that, about how much people are getting insanely rich throughout the last year. I think like the wealth of billionaires went up something like 40% last year. So it's pretty intense to think about that there are people with more money than they could ever spend ever, and how so many other people have barely any.
We've mentioned a couple other lyrics from Let's Talk already that come to mind. And for me, Greg, and this one, it reminds me of, so why don't we start making a history worth being proud of and start fighting the real fucking enemy from the only good fascist, and how we're willing to like throw the confetti and to celebrate the people that we think are going to improve our lives rather than working together with the people around us that we are now divided by because of these, political or cultural identities that end up separating us. While we bicker and we fight and we isolate ourselves essentially from like in a way that it feels more like sports, right? It feels more like sports than actual like social and political progress.
Yeah. And like you just mentioned that only good fascists. So that goes nicely into this next line. With every racist pointed finger, I can hear the goose steps getting closer. And this lyric means a lot more to me in 2021 than it did in 1996 when I was a 13-year-old who believed in the solidity of our institutions and viewed so many of the other issues being discussed in this song as something that happened in other places in the world.
Yeah.
Like, if you put this song on for me in 96 or 97 or whatever, I would just think about other places in the world throughout history, like the stereotypical images of over there.
It can't happen here. Right.
Yeah. And, that just reminds me of the book, The Plot Against America by Philip Roth, all of a sudden, too. Great book. Holy smokes. And of course, it was happening around me as well, where I lived, but it was happening to segments of the population whose lives and demographics were not like me. But it just goes to show the ease with which a lot of people in our society can create a bubble. And that's what I was in. I was in my comfy little bubble. And the last couple of years have illuminated ways that this is becoming more prevalent and more pressing and more important. I was just listening to a Fresh Air interview today, actually on my run with Evan Osnos, who's a journalist for The New Yorker, where he was writing about how he was discovering how Mike Pence and Dan Quayle communicated about how Mike Pence can have the election results not validated.
Right.
And I was like, Mike Pence and Dan Quayle did what? And that was a mind-blowing thing, because we're learning more details all along the way about just how fragile this thing we call society actually is and how weak we actually are. We are weak. And it just is becoming more and more illuminated to me with each passing day about how fragile all this is. And we're finally starting to talk a little bit more openly about, segments of our population are at least talking about the greatest threats is coming from within. Earlier this summer, Merrick Garland and the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas told senators that the greatest domestic threat facing the U.S. came from what they called racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocate for the superiority of the white race. And it's like those horror movies like Scream, you know what I mean? Where you realize the call is coming from within the house.
Yeah, right.
That's what it reminds me of. And the racist pointed finger is a myth that gets rolled out every election season. It's used by people in power, anti-immigrant activists, and election quote-unquote watchdogs as a way of justifying the reduction of voting access and rights and to scare people who vote legally. So all you have to do to manipulate people who do vote legally is to say that there are huge groups of people doing the opposite, and then people just straight up believe it. So for over 30 years, one of the stories goes like this. A van of undocumented immigrants travels from polling station to polling station, voting illegally at every one. The former president of the United States claimed that millions of undocumented votes happened in 2016, and that hundreds of buses carrying voters around the Northeast were voting illegally over and over in different precincts. These traveling voter myths were very prevalent in Arizona, Louisiana, Alabama, and Pennsylvania. In Alabama, there was a myth going around that stated that people traveling between polling stations were black. So that was a huge thing that scared the heck out of people, is that, oh my goodness, there are black people voting illegally. And in California, versions of this traveling voter story, the van is sometimes driven by the United Farm Workers Union.
Oh, God.
So if we can get people afraid in the U.S., we seem to be quite happy to give up and curtail one of the major ways the U.S. is kind of, sort of, but not actually really, but sort of illusory free. And that's access to voting, right? If we get enough people afraid, those people will be perfectly happy for access to voting to be decimated piece by piece by piece. So people who say, but my freedom, are the ones that very, very likely are leading this anti-voting charge. So one population at a time gets their rights rolled back, and then before you know it, you lose it too. And it's just these arguments are just so boring. They're so boring to me. They're so small because it feels so painfully predictable about this path that we're on. And it's just totally insane.
And that line, Greg, about the goose steps getting closer, it so often could be misinterpreted, I think, as hyperbole.
Yeah.
Whether it's 96 or 2005 or whatever. But it's clearly not, right? I mean, this is so clearly applicable to today. And I'm not saying that the band was particularly prescient or predicting in what would happen. But this is certainly just far more true that or applicable today than it was then. As Kathleen Ballou points out in Bring the War Home, that white supremacists are just consistently portrayed as backwards, as ignorant, as like these isolated lone wolf perpetrators. And that misinterpretation has dominated the narrative, which ends up ultimately de-emphasizing ideology. But fascist, race, and hate-based beliefs are just so normalized now, from right-wing militias to the Capitol insurrection, YouTubers, social media accounts. The steps have been getting louder and louder for a very long time, but they've been able to code things, or we just have our fingers so firmly jammed into our ears that we're unwilling or unable to admit what we hear.
Yeah. And then this next line, they no longer represented us, so is it or not our obligation to confront this tyranny? And it's so interesting to read this line in the context of the pandemic, where people are presenting vaccinations and masking as tyranny or enslavement. Like, I've seen people call it like slavery, and I am just like absolutely blown away, because I see it as neighborly goodwill. You know what I mean? But we're in the aftermath of the recall election in California, in the context of the ongoing attempts to disenfranchise voters in the U.S. This year, since the election, 17 Republican-led legislatures across the country have passed 28 laws between November of 2020 and now to do things such as invalidating ballots cast in wrong precincts and restricting different organizations' ability to collect mail-in ballots. So we're like, I see a lot of people who care a lot about this issue and do want to confront what we see as an impending and creeping authoritarian, anti-democratic bent to our history, to our story that we are currently traveling. But all we have here are 17 Republican-led legislatures across the country doing everything they can to make sure that we cannot confront it through the ballot box.
Is it not our obligation to confront this tyranny? Like, the answer's there right before your eyes. Rise, right? Yeah. Or the quote from Hedges that the band used in the lyric video. He said that we view ourselves as rational creatures, but is it rational to wait like sheep in a pen as they steer us to mass extinction? Why continue to obey the laws and dictates of our executioners?
Oh, man. Well, this is a heavy one, Keith. And, I did find some versions of the band playing this one live. If people want to watch the band doing this one, they played it a lot on their 2014 tour. There are great videos from August 16th and August 17th of 2014 at their Baltimore and New York City shows. And also there's a really great one on January 3rd of 2003 in Chicago at the Congress Theater. So, there's some really good live versions of this as well online if anybody wants to go and watch this tune performed by the band. But did you find any YouTube comments or anything for this one?
I don't have any, Greg. How about you?
Well, I found one that is about what you were just talking about, and said 2020, the Goose Steps, even closer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really just freaked me out. And that was the one that I really latched onto. But, to take us in for sort of a landing here, I really wish I lived in a country that lived up to its alleged values of caring about people. That's a really hard truth to swallow, because I know so many amazing people who live in this country, and so many people who it just feels like the power structure and the people who elect us don't deserve us. They don't deserve us. Like, there are so many amazing, incredible, talented, smart people in this country. And this country, like the physical landscape, obviously it's all stolen land, of course, but this is a beautiful physical landscape. And I think often, like, oh my God, like I know so many incredible people here, and I've been to so many beautiful places in this country, and the people that are in power don't deserve us, and they don't deserve to be in charge of this place. It is a disgrace. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about. But this feels like the most anti-life place that so many claim is so pro-life. The list of issues this song brings up about what faces leaders who cannot collaborate responsibly enough, because for so many years it's about the spectacle of talking smack on television that I feel like we're utterly stunted as to what we can accomplish until there's an educational renaissance in this country. And I hope we can collectively recognize that we're doing that before it's far too late. Like, it already feels too late, especially when you tie in climate catastrophe into this equation. But like, the outrage is what wins them votes. It's not what they're actually doing. Because if you fix everything, then you can't run on outrage. You know what I mean? If somebody goes in and fixes all the issues in this country and reallocates funding to make life better for all people here, then there's nothing left to fix. And that's not what wins elections. It's the most cynical ploy that has pulled over everybody's eyes. And it just like, it's just got me sad. So I don't know. What are you thinking about as we wrap up here tonight?
I guess I thought back about how I've donated money to just two politicians ever, like two people that I actually felt like I would support. And both of those individuals had essentially no chance of making it to the elected office that they were running for. And most candidates that I've ever voted for didn't really earn my vote, but they received it out of desperation on my part. I was eager to do my part to like vote against Donald Trump. Not that my vote matters in my state anyway. And if anything, the song in the last 5 years have taught me is that not to tether my identity, my hope, or vision for the country or my community to a party or to a single person, not to buy into the crafted personas and promises, curated, as you said.
Yeah.
To root for my millionaire to become the commander in chief, like it's like the Super Bowl. I will vote in every election. I will continuously push back against what is being normalized in my community in Indiana and across the country as a whole, but that's not enough. And I'm not going to take up armed resistance like the Zapatistas. But I guess I can resist the madness, at least in part, by not buying into the madness that is electoral politics.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and rate this. You want me to go first?
Go for it, Greg.
So I have really mixed feelings about this song, because the music, which would blow me away if this was the 90s and I was like a kid, the music doesn't blow me away anymore. But the timeliness and the timelessness of the lyrics is still so awesome, especially as we consider the resurgence of fascist-oriented styles of governance around the world.
Yeah.
I know that we only talk about a couple of countries mostly on this show, and I kind of feel badly about that because, we didn't even talk about like what's going on in Hungary or something like that. But, I'm aware that these issues are very prevalent around the world and getting worse. So if I could rank this song separately, I was thinking about how amazing the lyrics are and how the music underwhelms me. So I was thinking about, what if I ranked it separately? Like, I could give this song a 2 musically and a 4.5 lyrically. You know what I mean? So if I average this between those two distinctions, I get a 3.25 out of 5,
Okay.
which feels fine to me. I'm going to give it a 3.25 out of 5. And perhaps I should have been doing this for the last 60 plus episodes of thinking about the music and then thinking about the lyrics and then averaging those. But I'm kind of a dummy. So what an idiot I am. But I'm giving it a 3.25 out of 5.
Well, I didn't think of it at all. I didn't even go back and wonder to try to compare it to the other songs that I like more or less.
Yeah, I don't bother with that either.
I just thought of 4. I think this is a really, really good song. I understand the not grievances, but the observations that it doesn't move you musically. But for me, I think I don't need the music that the rest, the tone, the relevance, the well-stated words, the lyrics that have me thinking in a different way, however long after hearing the song for the first time, I think there's a timelessness to it. So I'm going to give it a really solid 4.
Awesome. Well, that is our episode on the state lottery. If you would like to find us, you can on Instagram and Twitter at propagandipod. If you would like to email us, please do at propagandipod@gmail.com. And I would like to sign off on this episode with the band performing this on January 3rd, 2003 at the Congress Theater in Chicago. So here's some Propagandy from 19 years ago. So enjoy. We'll see you next time.
Todd. Yes, Dick knows. The sitting straight to you, the confetti, the balloons, the mile-wide grins. The victory dance to welcome in the air to a state of disrepair. But it's just strange to me for acting like they won the lottery. But shouldn't they feel terror at the chance that lies ahead? Defeat and house the people, the system's left for dead. Crime hit the nail much harder on the head. It's profits before lives, they are motivated by greed. First they taught us to depend on their nation states to men. Our tired minds, our broken bones, our bleeding limbs. Now they've sold off all the splits and contracted out the tourniquets. And if we John knew who's, then we might just survive. This is what we deserve. On the palace floors to fight amongst ourselves. As we scramble for the crumbs they spit out, frothing at the mouth about the scapegoats that they've chosen for us. Every racist pointed finger, I hear the goose steps getting closer. They no longer represent us. Is it not our obligation to confront this tyranny? Why, thank you.
Fucking crushing the shit. Oh, fucking hell.